Here we go. Where are we at? Here we at. Oh. And welcome to Portal Mountain Development Meeting Stream number 87, I think. And we are dealing with some audio problems, so looks like we are going to be utilizing, I think it's the laptop microphone or the video cam microphone. I'm not really sure, but it sounds like we're in a bathroom or something, some kind of echo chamber. Maybe, but we'll have to do. It's better than last time, in which case you can barely hear it at all.
Yeah.
I think it should be enough to get transcripts out of it.
Yeah, we need new equipment, basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think
at
my
this point.
audio interface has died, it seems like. So, but here we are, and let's get this show on the road. So this is, I guess it's part 6 now. We've been spending the last 5 sessions trying to end this discussion, not end it, but wrap it up. It's the axiological conspiracy, the conspiracy to obfuscate the meaning of value. That's another way to put it.
Mm-hmm. And not like a centralized conspiracy, not
Right.
talking about like there's a cabal or any of that sort of stuff, but rather the not sumbonum, but the cumulative activity, right? The obfuscated activity, it makes it like an emergent situation rather than a planned,
Right.
executed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, bits and pieces within it are planned and executed. Sure, there's room for like the traditional concept of conspiracy, but
Some people realize that understand the milieu that they're in. This is where we have like callous hostility, that kind of stuff. Where it's kind of like, yeah, the system, it is what it is. I get it, I'm above that, but I'm just gonna go full tilt on it because that's all that there is.
I just don't care. Basically, that's hence the word callous.
Yeah. So I don't know how we should probably just like start from the start, just go easy, but like not go deep into anything, and see if we can outline it.
Yeah, like remind ourselves what the hell we're talking about.
Right. We were going to potentially just write some notes, catch up, but we couldn't really even hear the last video to see where we were exactly.
I might make fun of the gender wars a little.
We may bring this
have the opportunity
into other topics.
Simply because of what the environment has been like since the Olympics started and the shit show that ensued since then.
Been like that. But as always,
it's pretty strong this time.
Casual meetings. We're here to enjoy a couple beers with a couple friends and all of you. And this is our every other Sunday. Ideally, sometimes it doesn't work out that way.
We've had
It's been like a month now. Feels like.
That's how we're not caught up on ourselves.
Yeah, which is, it's fine though. Yeah, good. So we'll try to just take it easy. The axiological conspiracy.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that I like this topic is because when people are talking about making the world better or like doing something or like, oh, you have to recycle or like whatever it is to like fix the world, nobody seems to have a coherent vision of where did it actually go off the rails.
Right.
Like where did shit get crazy?
What makes shit go crazy to begin with?
Yeah, what continues to do so. So whatever it is that we discover in our past or try to articulate has to be something with immediate meaning to us. Like it has to be something, we need to be able to explain the past by looking at our present self and seeing, oh yeah, it could have started like that, and this same kernel of reality or a way of looking at things or a truth has come along with us for that ride from start to beginning. So we need a coherent picture. We can't just say, oh, like some some mystery thing happened, or
Right.
everyone got mad from this giant war or something, and that's why things fell.
Yeah.
No,
this is what the model is actually trying to model to begin with. Is that is how to present that
Turn it
story.
down just a bit. I think we're popping there.
Just like how to present that story into our ongoing current narrative. Right? So the model is the kind of attempt to create that world, that interplay of events and situations in the abstract. How to think about them, like how to go from one to the next step to the next step. How does it evolve?
Mm-hmm. Yep, and there's a pretty big arc, which a lot of people
Several.
like to. Sure, yeah, lots of arcs. People like to, um, when they talk about this stuff, talk about like the fall of mankind. It's
Yeah.
kind of like a, I guess, Christian type of view, or whatever it is. Something
Or Greek.
happened. Something happened a long time ago.
The Greeks
Sure.
viewed it that way too.
Right. So somewhere along the way, something was kind of like implanted in us, or something went wrong to where it shifted, and this is something we can witness within ourselves to this day. That would be the model.
Wouldn't even say implanted. Like it is. I have
It took
been,
root. We'll say.
I have been talking about like it's a foreign parasite kind of
Right.
kind
Implant
of rhetoric,
is
but like
tough term.
it's kind of like trying to state that cancer is a foreign entity.
Yeah,
It's
it has
not,
a foreign
it's not.
feeling.
It's the foreignness is in the operation, but of the familiar machinery, right? Like with the cancer, it's your own cells.
Yeah. No, you're right. I shouldn't really use that language of like separation, division, that kind of stuff.
I just wanted to make sure that the picture is clear that way.
Because we're not fighting to remove something from us, or like there's some invader.
Well, yes, the damaged parts, right? So it doesn't continue. There is like you do operate on a cancer. You remove the tumor.
But still, it's the way of thinking about something when you separate yourself from it in your mind to say this is something I'm apart from, that I'm fighting. Yeah. This causes its own problems.
I'm just being overly nuanced, I guess.
Great. So, yeah, we need to go back to the very start, the walled city.
Pre-walled city.
Pre-civilization. Right, we were talking about...
Because the wall becomes is when the environment is transformed into land, and then we have our first plateau, and the border, and what it prevents from and a plateau is established to say what is being prevented. So the prevention is from utilizing environment and any other way other than in the form of land.
Right. We
also nobody does anymore.
It's very tricky. I'm not sure if we even really fully agreed on this idea of like the feast economy being being something totally separate.
No, you're misconstruing it again. It's a transition period that is by necessity there because you have the start of the development of currency, but not its utility. There's another flip, is when this currency becomes utilized as currency. So there's a time and period where it's not the grain that's important, it's the alcohol that's produced from it, it's the drugs that are produced from it that's feeding the events that are happening. So this is a different state than the previous state, and it's also not the state into which it's going.
Right, and a difference between state, like that's fine, but between state and economy.
It's a transitionary situation. Well, it is its own economy at that time because there's no market yet. It's when the grain has become the thing that's being transferred in transactions is when it becomes a true market. So
I disagree. I disagree with that.
It's alcohol is the first medium. I'm talking about drugs, not alcohol. But like I'm talking about like the feast economy's produce is the first thing that is being commodified, and then it goes down a deeper layer into the grain itself. And that's the thing that's not being traded instead of the drink or the feast.
Right.
So it's not
So-
the feast anymore that's offered, it's the money that's offered.
That to me, there's no distinction there.
Why?
Because feast is a currency.
Yeah, but it's not transportable. It's not storable.
But still, in your heart, you are trading for it.
Yes, which is like why
That,
it's
that to me is the
which is-
important part.
which is why it's not a quite. Well, trade existed before that anyway. Trade is the economy between enemies, whereas gift is within the clan itself, within the thing. Transformation happens in two phases. First, you have the product itself that's being sought after, but that's still not currency. It's working on a thing that is becoming currency. Then it flips, and the currency becomes the thing, and everything else is after the fact. And then, and that flip is you have market economy. That's the model that we need to understand in utilizing this terminology. It's not like I'm trying to say this is an entity, this is a solid structure. It's a moving process, and it has thresholds, and it has to come through. It'll accumulate, past the threshold, and then
I agree that
go
we
through.
pass through different thresholds.
And once a threshold is it's like a catalyst, the reaction is just exponential.
But I would like a more clear distinction between gift economy or gift economics and market economics. And I understand there's gray area in between, but I don't feel like there needs to be a third economics because there's gift and there is trade. Those are the two different things that you do. It's either a gift or it's a trade.
The feast economy is the
You're
precursor to the market.
It's just you don't have currency. That's all. You don't have a good currency yet. You still have labor, which is commodified. You still have
so it's not quite market.
You have the alcohol, which is commodified. You have two markets.
So it's not the end result.
Those are two markets.
No, because you still don't have a solid currency. You don't have that.
You don't need it.
No,
the product is a currency, though. It's a proto-currency. The labor is a proto-currency, and so is the grain, the alcohol. You could trade with those things. You trade. You do trade with that. Just because there's no money there doesn't mean it's not a market.
I don't want to meld the two periods together into one. There's a distinct period that needs to be recognized that isn't market, that is the precursor, and it explains why market showed up.
Yeah.
And I'm not losing that phase into, and it's not the market economy. It's not a clear trade. It's not a clear gift.
We must be
something
talking
in
about
between,
something else.
and it's just not market. So there needs to be a term to recognize it, and that term has been selected to be feast, because the feast is what was, in effect, being the economy centered around that feast. Everything that was done was centered around the feasts.
Is there another layer that we can articulate this on?
Maybe, but I don't know what it would
different
be.
states transitioning between states.
This was supposed to be it. I'm not sure, or I have no idea what this problem is. I've heard you say that you have a problem with it, but I just don't know why or how it bugs you, to be honest. It's just not market yet. Because when I say market, I'm talking about like everything is a number now. We're at the market phase, you have the writing systems developed, and those writing systems aren't there to record the mythology. They're there to record transactions of grain. You
acknowledge that market transactions happen in the gift economy in pre-civilization. Before this, you have market.
Proto. They're not it yet, and that proto phase is the feast. Not quite there yet. You need the threshold. The threshold is that you flip from the alcohol being the point to. I keep saying alcohol, but I'm talking about the feasts.
We can't be using the economy. Economy can't be the overarching thing used to explain phases.
Why? This is the thing that motivates the activity. It's central. The feast becomes the central point around which all the activity, the economic activity, is centered. I don't see the problem.
You'd have to introduce a term like gift-centered society and market-centered society.
We already have that on the two ends of this transitional period. We have the two economies with two little balls, the beginning of a shaft, and then the shaft.
The shaft.
If you need a visual.
I do.
I've tried to draw it out to you like this before. I'm still confused as to why it's not working.
Well, we've only ever, I think we only argued about this like over.
And I'm not diminishing your confusion into saying I'm right and you're wrong. I'm trying to understand it so that if I'm wrong, I'd at least love to know how, because it makes so much sense to me right now. I am pushing it, and I want to clarify whatever is possible. Maybe in that clarification, I'll find my mistake. I don't know. Hopefully, if there is one.
To me, there are two types of economies.
Those are the extremes. Between the extremes, there's a middle ground. It's not that economy. It's not this economy.
But it never is.
What do you mean it never is?
Because you always have like the mother giving her milk to the child, even to
I'm
this,
not saying
to
they
this day.
disappear. I'm not saying like you erase one and make it another one.
But how do you?
It's the central.
Okay, so then you're just saying that it's an arbitrary point. You're choosing.
It's not an arbitrary point. No,
the usage of currency.
You don't see like a membrane and then you switch. It's all mixed. It's all mixing and mixing, and then it reaches a threshold. It flips, and now you have currency. But there's a point where it's not really mixing too. That's the other extreme.
Does this line up with plateaus?
So yeah, you start with the catalyst for currency, like the grain, the availability of it. That triggers a process, the feast economy. That process reaches a threshold.
Yeah.
That threshold switches the abstractions. So you don't have anything before the starting point, and you have everything after the starting point, and there's two extremes. And in between, there's a middle ground.
These abstractions, I believe, are captured by the plateaus.
Yes, they're recycled. They don't disappear. Gifts does not disappear.
Of course, but you get to this point through feasting.
They get rebranded.
You get to the point through feasting that suddenly a plateau can emerge from that. So currency is necessary for the first plateau, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about going into a plateau. We're not talking about going into the market economy. The market economy was always there, so is the gift. We're talking about it's been pushed far enough.
The market economy needs currency. The trade economy is what was there. Those are two. Another way to look at it is this. You have a certain branding. Trade, gift, right? You have a transitional period in which branding gets upgraded, and then you have a final period into which the brand is upgraded. That's called market. So, the branding upgrade does not decimate, does not erase trade, does not erase gift. It restructures them under its own structure. So there's a period of restructuring, and then there's the restructured result. And then there's a period of not doing any restructuring yet. Do you see? But once you pass the first plateau, you've already done the restructuring, so you're restructuring the restructure. So obviously you're never going to go back past the first one. So the process, yes, continues, as you've noted in the past before, in a very similar trend. But building upon a plateau and building upon no plateaus, two different situations.
I think I made it greener. Yeah, to me, the way I understand it is that plateau is what emerges. And I feel like market interactions can happen with any commodity which acts as a currency.
As
This
long
is
as
like barter, all that kind of stuff.
barter does not involve the same issue. So you lack the currency is providing a layer of obfuscation. So you transform the meaning into a number and the number back into a meaning. That is missing in regular trade. That's not like because it's not it doesn't get obfuscated by numbers. It gets obfuscated at most by some mythology. We trade directly. So
You know, you don't trade like yes,
that's
you trade.
that's the element
You
that's
always
missing.
trade directly with someone else. Always. You
No,
can
no.
have enough barters to go on that the meaning of what happened got obfuscated. You don't know how you got your goods, but there's a chain of barters that happened that made
It's not that
something happen.
obfuscation didn't occur pre-currency. It's the number obfuscation. That the fact that you can lay everything into a number and then transform that number into some other number and then transform that number into some other number and then extract meaning from that. If you don't have currency, you don't have that.
Okay.
And if you don't have that, that's not a plateau.
With barter, don't you usually?
I mean, I'm defining plateau to be that, so we don't want to backtrack on this.
Don't you count with barter?
Well, you can count with barter, but if you're counting 5 chickens versus, I don't know, a cow, fuck if I know what things are worth in those times.
Yeah.
And what is being traded. I don't know the specifics of that. That's like one time. It doesn't mean that forever and ever. It doesn't mean that it's worth, a cow is worth 5 chickens, like for the foreseeable future. Like you don't have the same level of writing down a balance sheet and then extracting information back from it. It's this abstraction. It's the fact that it lives on another plane entirely that I'm getting at. And again, the argument is that without currency, you don't get there. That's what makes it the plateau.
But okay. There is like a proto setup of all these things, though. In which you can say, yeah, you are counting. Like I know how many chickens is worth 1 cow.
That's what I'm talking about as a feast.
20
That's
cows
when that becomes kind of like the way of thinking, as you are trying to acclimate yourself into the next feast, into the next.
To me, this is simply shifting from gift to market.
Shifting, yes, but not being gift and not being market.
Nothing ever is being gift or market. There's pre-plateau and there's plateau.
Right. And there's a period into which it pushes to being plateau.
Right.
That needs
by increasing market.
And it's significant.
Increasing market interaction.
It's significant because before it, there is no access to the things that would make currency. So nothing is happening on this side until that is reached. That's changing. There is a change. The fields open up, and that field opening up created this weird-ass murky period that cannot be stable. It's never meant to be like a stable situation. It cannot be, because as you're creating said currency, you're eventually going to flip to using said currency in the abstract way. So that's the problem space that we can also discuss and see how that evolved, and that is what is being termed the feast.
Okay.
And the trade and all of the gift and all of that centers around the annual feast. And with that, I'll have to take a small break.
It is popular to think of barter as a separate thing, but it is a market type interaction, though, is it not?
Well, the myth in 33 myths of the system, it's like pointed out that the market economy did not evolve from barter. Barter was its own thing already, fine. But it wasn't like going to replace the whole situation, because people didn't barter a lot. Not as much as people think. Like, if you live in my village,
right? I'm not going to trade you the 5 chickens for the cow. Bullshit. Like, we're going to just live with the resources we have in the village
Yeah.
together. That's the gift economy. So the idea that the market economy goes from barter is flawed. Barter is just the trade between enemies to like leave, like let's just
Yeah.
be peaceful at this point. Exchange some materials that we're after and leave each
Right.
other alone.
This is what
And then there's a
market looked
third
like.
thing that comes out, the field. And now that we can have barters and gifts with enemies and friends within the same realm, if you will, around this one field. That's the feast. So it's kind of like a half friendly, half cautious interchange that everybody is sort of like, well, I do want to drink, so may as well let it go.
So we describe this as a pre-plateau, and that terminology I could agree with.
Yeah, it's not only pre-plateau, it doesn't start on its own. It needs a catalyst, the field, and it is not stable. It cannot stay. It has to transform into market. So it's
Yeah.
not like an economy that you can sit on. That is different from the other two uh, views, right? But then it's just a tool to explain what happened. It's part of the progression as to why from here plus this you go there. Well, because this keeps happening in between. It's not that and it's not this, it's a mixture of all of this, and that mixture just gets reiterated and reiterated and regurgitated into something that looks very different. So the gift doesn't disappear, barter doesn't disappear, the feast doesn't disappear, but it's all just under the cloud of the market. So it doesn't really matter because it crunches them all into one thing. It erases them.
Well, we shall pick this up in a moment. Be right back. Oh, it's okay. We can come back. I'll tell you my motivation. One of my motivations for being anal about that. When people look at their lives in the world and society right now, I would like for it to be a pretty simple thing to um, look at how our lives are sustained, how we get what we need all around us, and if there were simply two major ways, one is through gift, one is through market, that we interact economically with the world around us. That is either through
I see.
the self or through the ego. Boom, you've got two
Yeah.
things. I don't want to be like people worrying about, oh, why don't we just feast right now, like, or something.
Yeah, no, I think this is kind of trying to oversimplify it all, because there's a complication that's involved. For one, like, I'm not saying you got to worry about feast, you got to worry about gift, you got to worry about barter, because those things are, or trade, if you will, because those things are already subsumed under the market. So there is no need to have that sort of complex. This is only kind of like if you're trying to understand the other part of it, is like, how do you get to this combination? Like, why is it all so intricately merged, and why we can't pull any of this apart? And to understand why it's so interlinked, you can look at how it's, like, how it went from not being so interlinked as a one homogeneous market,
Yep.
into being like instances of gift and instances of trade happening, on their own. Like if you imagine a lake with like ripples across the water and the moonlight kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here's a spark of trade. Here's a spark of gift. There's a spark of trade. It just keeps happening all over. It's not a system of any sort. It's not integrated in any way.
But to me, that's a plateau.
It's just activities.
That's a plateau view.
Well, it's like the natural plateau, if you will.
Yeah, no, I mean when it's integrated.
When it's integrated,
That's
yes,
a plateau.
that's a plateau, because you have a specific medium, the number, accounting everything. That's where the plateau comes into picture. It becomes an abstracted thing. It doesn't lay on the natural plateau. It lies on something that's calculated in a computer, effectively. Just out of context. Numbers. Just numbers, calculated numbers. The obfuscation is the erasure of context, right?
Yep.
So you can't just like pick up this natural plateau and shove it into a market plateau. It tends to resist that change, right? So what will make it palatable? What in history made it palatable? What was the progression that made it all palatable? Well, first of all, it was slow. Then it was like it seemed like a good idea, and then had to become something that you don't know anything else except for it.
Mm-hmm.
And by that point, currency has got everything it needs to start being the primary focus of the economy. That focus of currency creates the market.
Yeah. I like the idea of a pre-plateau where things are getting assembled into place.
Yeah.
But it's still too chaotic that it could just blow apart or whatever.
And it did blow apart in many places, but in places where it's really sunk its teeth, it grew really, really far. And so it subsumed everything under.
Right.
That's this why I think it's like oversimplifying it, is that if you look at the pre-plateau part, you don't get like this simple picture of just gift or just trade. You have this another, you're very emergent, very fluid, very like, you can't follow sort of interaction. So it looks like its own mystifying beast.
To me, it feels simpler to acknowledge that people always had a choice all throughout time to engage in a gift economy or a market economy type behavior. And
That
market,
choice-
even though market wasn't, there weren't actually like commodities and
Well, the market is funny in the sense that it will in fact force one over the other. Because like if you and I want to exchange gifts, the market will interject and start saying, okay, well, what is the meaning of this gift to us?
tries to, yeah.
So taxing and all that kind of crap.
But like for the cognitive like understanding to make it easier, simpler, and it's simpler. It feels in my brain like there's two ways you can interact with other people economically. There's two ways. That's it.
Three.
We can pick different time periods of
Three.
time. So what's the third?
So the third is kind of like an offshoot of the second, but the gift, as you explained, the trade, and the trade through currency. So trade through currency, what I mean is that instead of trading for an item directly, you trade the item for currency, and then you trade the currency for some other item. So there's a step in between in the interaction. So that's how you can like look at the three different ways of internal, external, and subsumed, where everything becomes reduced to a currency.
I think we probably cleared it up enough.
I hope so, because I don't want to argue over it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to lose that step in the mix of explanation either. So I needed to, so my motivation, I need that phase to be clear and understood and being the catalyst of the two.
To me,
it's not this, it's not that.
Feast is a pre-plateau, not an economy. To me, that's just the way that I see it.
I use the word economy in a sense that you have a focus, and around that focus you have activity. So the gift economy is where the focus is demand and supply, right? Like the pure form of it, if you will.
Sure.
Pure in quotes.
Right.
So the activity of the village, like somebody needs something, somebody does something.
Goods
Somebody
are
needs
moving.
something, somebody does something. It's like there's no thought given to external factors or reasons or whatever. It's immediate. And the second one is the activity centers around the feast. So you still have the other centers, right? You still do that. You still avoid stepping on your other enemy tribes' footsteps, and you trade your goods with them directly, whatever. But the central activity of the group of tribes that surrounds this field becomes about making that feast available for the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year. So that's what the focus revolves around more. So it's not just about the exchange and the fact of exchange, but it's more like what is the main focus of all of the exchanges that are happening about. So you go from immediate to the feast to the currency. And that's what separates them as economies, so the centers of activities. And that's all I'm saying what an economy is, basically. I'm not saying it's like the mathematical or professional economy that people are talking about. It's the concept of just moving shit around.
Yeah, that's what I think. Moving supplies or whatever, getting things done.
Rearranging nature. Why are you rearranging nature right now? Is it the gift? Is it the trade? Is it the feast? Is it the currency? Well, now all things like gift, trade, and feast are reduced to currency anyway, so it doesn't matter. Hence the obfuscation. You can't even give somebody a gift without buying it, right, usually. And you can't buy, and if you're making it, you can't make it without buying the materials. And so on it goes. Like there's always going to be a reduction to currency no matter what. Hence subsume. This is a concept of being subsumed. So I can't, for example, imagine you wanted to gift me a car, or I wanted to gift you a car. Can we just like give each other the object? No, we can't. I mean, we could try, but paperwork is going to start having to be involved anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's move on. This feels like plateaus to me. Again, it just feels like plateau,
Well,
pre-plateau.
in some senses, everything is a plateau. It's just that I'm not giving the pre-plateau that label is because it's an emergent natural plateau. It doesn't have a distinct. It's not a distinct concept from the animism that we've discussed earlier, right? Like it just I don't know, a recreation of said animism in that in the economic sense.
Right.
That's why it's kind of like
Yeah.
it's not its own. It isn't its own thing. It's not its own currency. On the other hand, and feast on the other hand are their own things. That things are revolving around.
But to me, within this, if let's say you call it feast,
Abstract things, not the things that are immediate in your environment, but they're abstractions. They're things you're thinking about, like the paradise, the outcome, the delay.
right? Mm-hmm.
Things that I'm kind of skimming over, but you probably understand what I'm referring to.
So I wanted, again, I'll just reiterate my kind of justification. I wanted a way where people can look at their behaviors within the world, economically, and be able to distinguish between utilizing self and
Other.
polymorphism and using the ego to get
Oh, okay,
things
okay.
done. Which one are you using to get things done? And I would have liked for there to be a clean delineation between this is what we
So
call it when you use the self. It's, you gift and you do stuff like that. This is what you call
we
it when
have a
it's the
problem.
ego. And even in the feast, you have people there thinking about their ego, like, I'm going to get this next time, it's for me. That's
Well,
right.
yeah, that's the problem, and there's a problem in doing it because up until this point in our conversation, I've been building up from bottom to top, right? But the problem that I'm talking about now is that we we were talking about how things flip abstractly, right? But now we're resting on numbers to negotiate everything else, hence
Right.
on a plateau. I'm just being dramatic with my gestures.
Yeah.
So we're not talking to a person pre-plateau. We would be talking to a person who's already a few plateaus up. And what you just said, like made me realize that if you're trying to picture it, that anything to do with trade, the self, the other, any of those sort of model speak um, ways will have to be funneled through ego to make contact with the market as an agent of the market.
Yeah.
So that's the difficulty. You can't even tease these things apart because you have to funnel through the ego because the relationship has been inverted. So when we're building up, the ego appears up top. But when we're looking at a person experiencing the world as it is today,
Yeah.
we have to look at all of that model speak is going to go right back down through the ego.
Right. I get that point. My thinking was this would be a way of talking to people who like members,
Mhm.
say people who have already achieved membership. Let's say, let's say, um, and we can they already know it deep within themselves. When you talk about two different types of an economy, one of self and one of ego, they can be like, oh yeah, yeah, okay, I get it. And then when you try to lay out the system, like how to proceed from here, they can work from there, right?
Yeah. So I think we've done that many times by tackling everything through reducing that interaction to the membrane of the trade guild. So, so in practice, as a flipped individual, if you will, right? One who sustains themselves, who had sustained themselves through the ego in the market
Yeah.
for all this time. What the premise is, right? As we've been building the guild up, is you you recognize the market as it is, and you try to piece by piece take back some of it and create this trade membrane by taking something back into it and starting to um, restructure your own ego back into self and self-reference, and that's like the point of focus, right? It's taking those things. So you'd still have to buy like your housing, you'd still have to buy your food, you'd still have to buy your clothing, you'd still have to buy your bed to sleep in and all of that,
Right.
but that's the membrane part. You've done that, and now you restructure what you've got into being able to be hygienic, have nutrition, like start to negotiate model speak within that small little bubble, and then you expand the bubble, and then you expand the bubble, and the final expansion of this bubble is the trade guild, like the full thing. So you kind of like nucleate and expand based on a catalyst sort of understanding. Like the focus becomes like the catalyst for the backwards reaction, if you will. It works on the same plane that was created by the plateau. So before plateau, everything wasn't necessary, but
Right. Yeah.
it got
I get
restructured
that.
into
Yeah.
the plateau. Now we need to restructure the plateau to be isomorphic back with what was before,
This is our.
but not going below the plateau.
You don't have to destroy everything
Yeah.
and start over from nothing.
It's just the same concept, but
We take the existing structure and facilities of thought that we have established that everybody has, and utilize through that. That's the bricks of construction that we build.
it's sort of to like re-illuminate a lost story or a lost temple or a lost, like it's a dramatic.
But it's not a going backwards. It's
learning from.
looking towards that, but fashioning what we have right now into that reflection of that.
Right, because to be fair, yes, we've moved away from being quote unquote the primitive type of animal that we were, but at the same time too, we are still the same type of animal that we were. So recognizing that aspect of us seems weird to like push away.
Right.
Not just seems weird; it has tremendous negative consequences.
Mm-hmm.
We're not robots. I mean, we all say that to ourselves and then flock to being robots and shunning people for not being robots. It's a shit show.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
It's a shitty shit show.
Yeah. So this problem, when currency came along, when we had our first plateau, we had the currency up and running. Suddenly, everything of the economy can be potentially obfuscated. And how is that accepted? We lost the ability somehow, I guess, or it was beaten out of us to ask question of the context of the world around us, to care deeply about everything around us, and just not care. It's the market. You give money, you take the product.
I have a slightly less guess. Like, it's still a guess, but it's like less of a speculation than that. But it's still like how. So.
I was a more.
No, but I think it's interesting enough.
Flavor than how.
I think it's interesting enough to like sort of go over a tiny little bit. In that, the first what you have to have is generations. So generations engage in feast. So it's normal, right? It's normalized. The second thing that would have to happen is now.
Pardon?
So I've stressed many times that the fields weren't used for food, because to initially nomadic people, they knew exactly what would happen if they stuck around in the same place for too long, right? Things change, they would starve, so they don't do that. But the fields created an interesting pocket in that usually, year after year, there's availability of stuff. Now, the other thing you can do with most of that grain is you can actually start to produce foodstuffs. So as the feast economy continues, more and more uses of the plants are discovered, utilized, and things like flour become a thing, things like bread become a thing, you know, baking becomes a thing, many different activities become a thing. Generations passed. Those activities are now the norm. You can't go back. Now you have something that you constantly need, constantly use, constantly need, constantly use, can't leave, need more people, can't leave, need more people. It becomes the primary thing to utilize for everything. Settlement, walls, city. Because all of that needs protection, all of that needs defending. As more of it is produced, more of it needs accounting. So people get more and more sucked into the generation by generation of only doing things around this activity at the neglect of almost literally everything else. And then it becomes the primary food source. And
the activity becomes managed somehow because it's known the number, like the steps and the quantities of things that have to be done in certain quotas. As long as you follow those numbers and that instruction, the recipe, you'll get your field.
And then you have generations of mythology and all of that surrounding all of this. Like, this is what we do.
Yeah.
So of course it's normalized, and by the time the actual market takes place, it's like passing through the what do you call it? The event horizon. Like, from the outside, it looks like you're burning up at the wall. From the inside, you just pass it without being phased whatsoever.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Until you hit the singularity, right? So it's a similar analogy here, where when you pass that threshold, like if you're the one passing the threshold, you don't feel it. Like there is no event, you don't see a boundary in the universe, so to speak, that you're crossing. It's only visible if you're like billions of miles away watching it happen through your own perspectives.
But I'll also look at the case where somebody in a tribe can just go to the wall and give their labor and like start living,
Which happens, yeah.
living the high life or whatever, right? That's just like a choice. And
Yeah, like you have like shit, man. You have like still tribes in the Amazon and like in other islands that are still resistant, but that's like almost over, right?
Anyways, we'll take a short break here.
the exact same activities that were pre-Plateau.
Right. Is this the right microphone? I have so many microphones on right now.
Hello,
I think it was this one. Okay.
So
I figured out. We did like so. My problem how I get anal is by normalizing, trying to normalize terms. We used to talk about two things. One, the market machine. Two, the polymorphic machine.
yes,
That is one thing I like.
this is not. This is
I
not
like
this,
having that. So I feel like I lost that in our discussion.
This is related. So this is related, but it's not the same
That's, I
discussion.
know, but that's what I want to point to.
So that's okay. That discussion is more like the overarching order and chaos situation and flipping of it. It's more like the high level stuff than the stuff that we've been just discussing. So yeah, it's all there. It's just not the tangent, if you will. That discussion just is simply this. There's your pre-plateau, there's your post-plateau, right? You have natural polymorphism pre-plateau, and then you have no uh, isomorphism. Then you have like no regard for isomorphism at all happening, and then you have okay, well with that disregard, the system that's been created, how do you restructure it again to be look like the isomorphic one?
Right.
So that's that's a discussion of like the neglect and rearranging that neglectful system back into. So the polymorphic machine would be like the system reinvented in its own fashion to be isomorphic again. So it's like post plateau. Do you see what the logic behind the terminologies and the separation of situations? Because context is different for a polymorphic machine than it is for like your animism, which is what I would like to be referred to as the pre-plateau situation, is like a more of a just a generic animistic situation.
Right. Okay. So after plateau, you're saying that's
Yeah.
polymorphic. We're polymorphic.
So polymorphic machine is trying to retake the
Yeah,
animism
okay.
that preceded it.
Yeah.
But it is already built upon the machine.
Therefore, that's why it's a machine.
Mm-hmm. So there's a difference, but it's like it's subtle and it's cool to know that stuff.
Yeah. So we never go back to the pre-plateau animism or whatever.
No.
All we have now is the polymorphic and the market.
Machinery to dashboard with.
Right.
Because there's never going to be a non-dashboard situation.
Okay. So
realistically speaking,
I think that's where that like I can be satisfied with using that terminology, and then market can be a more a mix of those things, right?
Yeah, market is like a medium. It's like if you want to like condense all of the plateaus into a single term, market, that would be it. Because everything rests on the currency that precedes the first plateau. If it wasn't for the currency, none of the plateaus would be built on top, stacked on top of each other. And so the story goes.
Right. Is there another term for market machine? Can it be called a different machine? Because the terms are overlapping.
So the purpose of even talking about the market machine is that it's a soundbite provider. At the end of the day, it's churning out narrative.
Right.
That soundbite is about how to take the self, make it into an ego, and how to take ego and splatter it as agency across the ontological matrix, which is also constructed through soundbite.
Right.
So the whole purpose of talking about market is to give a view of what the ontological matrix looks like under its effects, if you will. So we're talking about the obfuscation of one's own mental models. We're talking about how the becoming an agent of the matrix itself,
Okay, but
and all of the kind
the
of things.
matrix to me is like the ultimate economy medium or something. Like
Well,
it's all the flow of goods and information is happening through this agency matrix.
Well, not just the agency matrix. Remember that diagram has a flip side, which is going to talk about the
Yeah.
polymorphic machine.
Right.
So the fact of the matrix does not stipulate the fact of the ego or the agency, because it can work just as well for holograms and models in models mechanism.
Right. Holons as opposed to agents.
Right. So the difference between that and this is that imagine in a world in which you didn't feel like you wanted to go to work today, and you had to because there was a demand for something to be done, for example, and you can call me up and be like, "Yo, tired. I need this to do. Do you have any like interest in doing this, that, and the other thing?" I'd be like, "You know what? I'll do this and that. I'll call up buddy over here, see if he wants to do the other thing, see what he can do."
Yeah.
And everybody is in the form. You just pass the plans along, and people know how to do shit in this situation. But like, I'm not talking about
Right. As opposed to, oh, I'm not part of your company.
exactly.
Or you're not paying me.
That's not even
payroll.
It's not even a thing. Everybody's concerned with finishing the thing that is in demand.
Instead of
Right.
whatever technicalities of
And
hierarchy.
nobody is under some obligation to do it. People just like, oh yeah, I got time. I have nothing to do. I'll build stuff.
Right.
Why the fuck not?
And with agency, you tie the ego, the individual,
To a contract.
Each self, their own. How would you even freaking say that? But
What was the
you're
the
tying.
ego is
In a corporation, you have a structure, a hierarchy of positions that, and each person is in a position, and only that person. It's like your self identity, like your persona.
Yeah.
Say your first name,
Remember,
last name. That's who is allowed to be doing this
I
job.
think we just forgot our own definition of ego for 2 seconds here. But ego is really like your so the self is the self-reference appearing in a narrative in general. Ego is that self commodified as something to trade on that market. So it's a thing that you interject into the market.
Right.
That is connecting to your own
Your professional life, sort of.
Yeah. Or like me being a father, or me being like, all these labels that come along with social.
Right. And often you'll see mirrors from below and above, like both things happening at once.
And I'm not saying that the narratives themselves are invalid in some sense or not. What I'm saying is that they're rigid. Like, whereas opposed in a polymorphic sense, they're fluid. Right? Like, even things like parenting in a tribal setting don't look very, like, like the whole tribe is the parent of a child, basically.
Potentially. And it's up to each individual's interest in anything that's around them. It doesn't mean every single person
if
has
I don't
to
get
be
up
interested
and you
in
get
your
up,
kid.
it's fine, right? It's the same work. It's like with work situation. If you don't get up, but I get up, that's fine. If Buddy gets up instead, that's also fine.
People hear this discussion of stuff like this and often get triggered, I guess you could say, by certain sound bites.
How will things get done?
Who's going to do anything?
Well, like, first of all, most of the things that are getting done don't need doing, and the things that are needing doing aren't getting done anyway.
Yeah,
so,
let's start with that. Nothing we need is getting done as it is, so can we...
At the very least, what we're offering is the same situation, except where you aren't, forced into doing the things that don't need doing.
Yeah, 1 second. Pause it here for a sec. Wait, did I unpause it or I just...
Where were we? Here, we're back. Is it the right window?
Hello, 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 hello.
This one, I believe.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like it.
Looks good. Anyways, yeah, sound bites and all that. There's so yeah. They start with the premise that, well, what even is getting done? All the things that are needs, all the needs people have are not being satisfied. What they don't need is being done.
There is a problem called world hunger. How does the world have a problem with hunger?
All right, and this makes me feel like
like what? Modern world has hunger?
when I first let's call it achieved membership or experienced membership.
I remember the story. Yeah.
I had a very like
Profound
slap
experience.
visceral experience of like just imagining, because I'd already been loaded up with a vision of the world, of what the earth is like and where people are, and I've traveled many places.
On a bias.
And then all of this,
you have to
it
say
is what it is.
You have to
All
be
of
on a
that
bias.
came into my awareness at that time.
Like at once.
Since
So,
membership is there to
funny.
do so, and it's like, holy
Not to
shit,
interrupt.
what is our
Not to
world?
interrupt, but like a thought occurs
like
to me that's
WTF.
really relevant. Is that like notice how you said you were traveling up until this point. You've been traveling and being in different places, and our discussion about obfuscation, how those places have been siloed, if you will, experiences for you up until a certain point in your life where you just crunch them all together into like one moment. You took the dream of all of these, right, moments that has occurred, crunched them into one single narrative, implanted it into your current moment, if you will. Just model speaking my way through it.
Yeah. So if there was nothing else in the neural web, the neural bundle of connections, suddenly a kind of almost new thing come up that is available to literally everything. It's like somehow is just
all of them interlinked into one web of
in a snap you get that.
of
So
the experience.
whenever you start diving back into the old memories, this thing is always sitting there like
in a web.
Hello, I'm not. I am all part of all this.
Right. So like this is connected to that, and you can't escape it. Every
and
time you think
this
about
ball
this,
web,
there's that.
this web ball is like a conglomeration, accumulation of your experiences, patterned onto your.
I'm trying to
your
utilize.
chemistry.
I'm trying to utilize this to like really hone in on the whole dream moment conversation that you and I have, so that you and I are in sync and about what I'm talking about usually. And this is like the very thing that I'm trying to describe.
You would have had to have this sort of experience. There's many terms, different spiritual things. For a Christian, it's like born again.
So
Buddhism, it's born for Pure Land, born into Pure Land.
Sure.
Right? There's a word given to this phenomenon, where in which you've taken this whole bundle of stories that you've accumulated, wrapped it up and said, this is a story, and been like, now I am somewhere outside of that, I guess.
The Buddhist word for this would be yana. So like this. So here's what I'm.
It's something that happens to you as well.
Here's what I'm trying to get at.
Not that you try to make it happen or try to think about it.
You're getting me excited about something. So if I may just like push through the excitement slightly. So the whole dream moment discussion, right? You're talking about like, just to take a step back a little, you were talking about like how you experienced travel here, then you experienced travel here, then you experienced travel here, then you experienced travel here, right? All of this created this arc of a story, a narrative, a run. Yeah. And if you think back on it, this happened and this happened and this happened, so the way you experience it is in a sequence, right? So every time you experience that, that is the dream that you're experiencing. But taking a part of that sequence now, taking a part of that sequence then, taking a part of that sequence then. Each one of these moments sees almost the entire sequence in different interconnection, but in this moment it's about that part of it. It's in this moment it's about that part of it. But
as
at
being
all,
significant
at all points, all parts of it are there. So what I'm saying here is that the entire dream is actually experienced within the moment over and over and over again. It's just that bits of it, with the experience, aspects of it are and resonate with this moment and that moment, the next moment, in
It
this
makes
particular, and then that becomes another its own narrative, and the meta stuff
right.
continues.
So you kind of it's not something to escape or get out of narrative storytelling, story making. Who we are, who I am, and this who I am, this self identity or understanding, is such a knowledge area that can be focused on. Whereas if something changes here, suddenly
Then yeah.
everything becomes affected, right? So within your APS, I guess we would say your
So-
knowledge, your map of your own self has certain areas. One area you didn't know about was like you could say it's up here, maybe it's up here, a spiritual,
So to continue
like-
your narrative, so to continue your story,
right?
though,
So we're just building about, oh, now I'm this
sorry,
as
to,
well.
to continue your experience, though, my segment is almost over. I
Right.
promise. I'm not trying to cut you off.
I'm not trying to cut you off. I think we're doing well,
Yeah.
as long as we don't forget
We're
the
just
point.
excited. So now that you've taken those desperate pieces, all of a
Disparate.
sudden, disparate, whatever. As long as people know what I'm saying.
Close to desperate, desperate,
Disparate. Okay, that's a tough one. Disparate. Okay, so you had an experience of each of these narratives in a disparate fashion, right? All of a sudden, everything combined into one, and every moment since then is like it reintroduced the whole story over and over and over and over. Another aspect that's happening is
the
that
meme
this
plex.
is but the other thing that's happening is that these moments, one by one, become part of a narrative, and that narrative gets fed back into the experience of the next moment, the
Right.
next moment, the next moment,
Right, right.
and it builds and builds and builds and builds.
And it's like there's the neurochemistry of it. So just having a vision of having a new moment coming in, and having it that those active areas in your brain fed into the rest of the meme plex as it kind of like goes
Yeah.
through another cycle.
Another word I was thinking of is potential. It's building more potential into the dream, so that each moment that the dream comes through has that much more energy to feed into itself.
Right, and how does the meme plex remember where it was? This is memory, the APS, right? Every time, every cycle of signaling you're going in is just like a heartbeat,
All right.
heartbeat of more of what was.
Well, you've just made a case for why I've ever created that stupid brain diagram that nobody seems to understand what it's for. This is
Yeah.
what it's for. Because if you look at it,
The
and
APS
I mean,
has to update, your memory updates,
there's more to it though.
you learn, things
So-
change.
So you know that central bubble called mapper?
Mapper, yep.
If you remember, like there is like a cycle of layers. Actually, the original one was so much. The original one will make more sense to anybody listening, to be
You
honest.
think so? Well,
Yes.
we'll wait for my computer to stop crashing.
And I'll explain why.
So we have to put it on desktop here.
Yeah.
Whichever one that is.
So the first thing to understand is that this middle bubble,
That's why I'm going to be here a second.
this middle bubble,
Freaking. Sorry, the middle one, yet mapper.
yeah, it's more like the most abstract concept that shouldn't be thought of as an entity and an actual entity in the diagram. It's the most.
Yeah, I'm going back. Oh, wait, I don't even know if I know where the other chart is.
Well, go to the Telegram. All you need to do is go to Telegram.
I see. Okay, it makes sense. It makes perfect sense now.
Yeah, no, please, no.
It's
I mean, I love the idea, like, once it's finished, but
It's
right
coming.
now, definitely not.
coming. Yeah. So, the brain chart.
Simple brain chart, so simple. So, there's a central bubble called mapper, right? And then we have, like, all of the neurological layers, neurochemical operating system layers.
Yep.
And then we have
Going from fundamental to significant through artifact up to through meme
yeah, all the way up to
type object. Yep, artifact.
Yeah. So, and what you're seeing is that every time you go from one layer to the next, there's like an instance of the mapper
that does the mapping. So the mapper is the abstract concept that simply says, for between any layer you have a mapper. So in this case, like if you were to like kind of think of it as a non-bubble bubble, it'll be even more useful. It's more.
It's like a layer glue.
It's there to tell you that translator, instantiator, the controller, the converter, the transformer, all of these things are just mappers between this layer, and that layer, and this layer, and that layer. They're not. There's no mapper in the strict sense. It's like a totally abstracted concept.
This is this is the yeah, like you said, the abstract, the model of each layer in its own language.
Yeah. So all of this nomenclature is to tell
These
you
things
how
also happen in a snap. There's not a step-by-step layer by layer. Like when you're talking brain signal chemicals, being able to just lightning bolt, like ball lightning through your meat,
Yeah.
in all different ways. Like these all happen simultaneously, do they not? Like
Yes.
It's only by the chart that we say they're separate.
We're trying to follow layers of complexity. We're not trying to follow temporal currents.
Right. Yeah.
So we're not following temporally. We're following complexity. So the same thing is happening, but it's explained this way.
So
it's
stacking
explained that way.
layers, like when you look at the neurochemical operating system layers.
So when you look,
you're having different languages at each layer,
right,
and different complexities, and these complexities have emerged to more and more advanced forms throughout time. Like you could say they were all present, but have just become more, I guess, instantiated.
So here's an explanation that might work. You can read 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, right? But you can read that same string of zeros and ones as add register A to register B, right? Or you can read this as add X to Y. Or you see what I'm saying? Like it just, the meaning of the sequence takes on new and more informative elements. And that's the same with the OSI model, that isomorphism. The same thing is happening. It's the same sequence of bits on the wire, but that same sequence of is a datagram. That same sequence of bits is a frame, then it's like a packet, then it's a, right? Like, or it's sequences of sequences, or it doesn't matter. It's very flexible how you reassemble it back up top.
Right.
So
yeah,
the
you
the
can have
zeros and the
protocols.
ones are the same.
You can have protocols sitting there waiting to interpret the incoming stream.
Right, and
up the stack.
And it has and the zeros and the ones don't change. It's the same zeros and ones. So it's the same signals. It's the same artifacts. It's the same symbols and artifacts and memes, right? Like we're talking still about zeros and ones, or signals, or non-signals,
right? Yeah, you have to keep in mind it's
so
representation.
Yeah.
Is a problem.
So this diagram does not represent a transformation through time. It represents a transformation through complexity within a single instance in time.
Right.
This is that is mapped to this, that is mapped to this. So the way to read this diagram is this. You have these layers from signal all the way through to object going in the circle. You have mappers that transform one layer to the other, or map the layer, or the way to look at a mapper is to like, how does signal get utilized as a symbol? How does symbol get utilized in an artifact? That's what those concepts represent. It's the thing that maps the lower layer into a meaningful upper layer, and you don't get the full meaning until you get all the way to object. And finally, the next thing to read in this diagram is that all of these transformations, all of these mappings, themselves become information to the brain, to the underlying structure. This is simply because neurons are firing, and the firing of neurons constitutes signals to begin with. So it doesn't matter the fact that you're looking at this complexity, that complexity, this complexity, or that complexity. All of these complexities have a resultant signal firing patterns that go right back onto the underlying system and reinform it on each step of the way.
So it tells you something about the brain. There must be like not central, but places that can sense from anywhere here where signals are coming in.
Yeah, so you'll see from controller there's a line to signal. From
Does this have,
instantiator has a line to signal.
every line of the neurochemical operating system? Like I know symbol there
It doesn't have narratives.
and signal.
It doesn't have narratives in there because it stops short of
I
going
noticed
past
that.
the concrete.
Yeah, but as far as a string of layers here,
We have signal, symbol, artifact. We have
right, and that's not missing anything. Meme type object.
meme type object. That's the ones we're concerned
Yeah,
with.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Right.
No. 1, 2, 3 is particle.
No, I know.
Particle,
4, 5, 6, 7,
particle
8, 9.
neuron, and cell, but that's a given.
I just meant to count them up.
Particle, cell, neuron. Sorry.
The fact of threes.
Yeah, this is the middle two triads of the neurochemical operating system. And so it's just a mapping between those layers, the names of those mappers between the layers, and the fact that all mappings result in signals being dispersed right back into the same system to recomplicate it even further to create new symbols, new artifacts, new memes, and so on and so forth. So like the existence of an object includes the existence of another object, and so on in the system. So if you circulate that system through time, you'll see what the complexity adds to that effect. It's like, yeah, you had a linear story, but now you have this synchronic bombardment of signals that are coming through from just picturing the single one moment. The whole activity of experience creates experiences, and so on and so forth. So there's like a loop back in every stage. So for example,
I'm imagining, like, let's say you're in an action movie and you're some kind of Jackie Chan, and suddenly you get jumped. The moment of that object of someone jumping you comes into view, and it's like, okay, now it's combat is the object right now.
Sure, it's like being in the flow. Another thing to really hone in on and like take away from this diagram is that from signal to symbol, right? You have
the next thing you're going to notice is what is his attack, because you're getting jumped. Right? First it's combat, then it's what is the attack. Now what do I do? Like this is what's flowing through like in a snap, right?
Yeah, but that's like the temporal stuff. So what I'm talking about.
But that's what you just brought up.
I did bring it up, but I want to build up to it as well. So like, just check this out. Like just a small example. You're going from signal to symbol, up a layer. There's a mapping. The fact of that mapping sends out more signals, which means potentially more symbols appear within the first symbol. So it's like
you have a label. You can have a label thought of something if that's a chair. So you see all of
before we get there, the point I'm trying to get at is that before you even get to the interpretive side of things, where you have objects, types, and what you're talking about, the very fact of a symbol appearing can preclude another symbol appearing and another symbol appearing. So the buildup could happen way before you're quote-unquote conscious of it, if you will. And then you go to the next layer, and you have the same cycle happening. So the artifact appears, but that appearance of the artifact is another set of signals sent back through the system, which is another set of symbols that sent back to the system, which is another set of assembly of artifacts sent back through the system.
Yeah.
So again, before you even get to the active part, you have another loop going through. And then the same thing happens to the meme, the same thing happens to the type, the same thing happens to the object. So by the time you get an object space, the synchronic signalic information that you've been bombarded with is nowhere near the linear stuff that it came.
Okay, hold on, wait.
That it came through.
Yeah,
as
thanks.
a path.
Bring that up again in a second, but what I'm taking as, so for a couch, signals can be, it's obviously going to be visual coming in, but like collections of, like, say, leather surface,
Mhm.
Like I know what leather surface is, and that would be like potentially a symbol. It's also
symbols assembling
could be an
into
artifact
words.
if that's the object of what you're
yeah,
looking at.
the couch would be an
But
artifact.
when I glance at it and I get, leather surface comes in without thinking about it, pillow top shape, backrest, like when all of these different symbols, right, the signals can come into to be that symbol. When
Abstractions
all of those
behind them.
come all at enough at once that are triggering the artifact, which is like the couch, as that's a thing that I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Then this is just moving on and on, right?
Right, but the artifact couch could
So
send
this is
signals
the
for
kind of-
sitting. The artifact for couch can send signals for resting. The artifact for couch can send signals for
Sure. Like its properties. Every
right.
couch is different.
and then the picture is more informed.
Depends
and the
on
picture
what
is
you
more
actually
informed.
want. Am I just looking for a couch, or am I just idly wandering my eyeballs around the room
Yeah.
and seeing what happens?
And so this is why like the moment always appears as like you have like one object of focus and like a shit ton of peripheral vision, if you will. That is the rest of the picture that it's in.
That's pretty good. Good walkthrough of this chart. I don't know if we've done that in years.
I don't think I've
If-
ever. I don't think I've
if
ever
ever.
been inclined to make the walkthrough because it's up until now.
Yeah. So nobody
With-
feel
with-
ashamed.
With Ian's claim that he didn't understand it ever, which is like I thought he did because he never mentioned it before. So it's nothing to. It's not shaming. To be clear, it's more like I
I'll
just
be
didn't
honest.
realize.
I haven't even looked this deep into it.
Well, I mean, I didn't explain it because I
We've
showed
never.
it.
You and I have never had this
Well,
conversation.
Well, when I showed it
that.
to you, you agreed with me, and I was like, okay, you get it, right? Like that's how I take.
But
things.
you can get. There are many things to get.
When you ask a question is when I know what you. Like I also need to be prompted.
It's a skill of teaching, of education, to know or to try and have insight to where your student is, to
Right,
what they
but-
need to hear, because
but
they
this
don't
is
know the
what-
questions.
So okay, so I had this diagram on display so many times, and nobody ever raises
Actually, we hardly ever bring it up anymore.
anymore. I thought it was
Right.
internalized at this point.
By everyone,
for
yes.
so long.
You all know the brain chart, right?
That's literally my words. If you look back into like years ago, that's what I would say.
Right. Well, the context of certain nuances has arrived, and we'll take a short break here. But you're having an idea.
Yeah, so it's important to understand that this is also the chart that is pointing to what self-reference means in the model. So it's like if you want to understand what self-reference is, look at this chart.
Shout outs.
Nice.
Shoutouts to Eon.
Yep.
Alright, where are we at? Brains.
So why am I saying that? Is because, again, the same thing I just said before. After every mapping, you see a connection right back to signal to intensify the complexity of the entire system, right? Well,
Except for symbol.
symbol? No, it's got a converter. Say a converter. The symbol gets mapped by a converter, and that converter sends signals.
Okay. I just never. Yeah, you're
So,
right.
so the only reason the mappers are even there is to
Oh
illustrate,
yeah, it's the same as the meme type object.
is to demonstrate that the existence of a layer creates more information into the underlying layers. So that's the self-referential loop that we're talking about. This is what self-reference means. So like, a signal is a symbol is a signal. A symbol is an artifact is a symbol. An artifact is a meme is a symbol, is a signal. It always comes back to more signal, more signal, more signal. So signal makes signal, makes signal, makes signal. That's the self-referential loop. The complexity rises, the complexity of the signals rises. Complexity rises. The self-reference is there. You don't go beyond signal, and yet you have all these layers.
It's a weird thing to map, to put down into
It's
like
not the self.
a
It's
rational
the self-reference.
looking chart.
Yes, it's not the self, it's the self-reference. So, also, this is where your affect is involved, and that's because once the symbolic
So
representation.
is this the self-reference chart?
So, yeah, in a sense.
Okay, then that's the
So, the sense bubble, for example, that's just like your extrinsic neurological operating system giving you a sense of touch, or hearing, or seeing, or thinking, which is the signalic sense. I think the signal should go into there too. Might have forgotten that. But the
Good
point,
thing we've gone over it.
But the point being is like that's not the real thing. But also is like the symbolic, the signalic representation also carries with it what's called affect, and affect is basically pleasure, pain, or neutrality. From this perspective, but right now we're not talking about like.
No, this is after that has already climbed up the artifact meme type object ladder.
A symbol with a sense. So once you sense the symbol, basically.
Right. But let's say it's getting
you're
slapped in the
aware
face.
of it. Symbol with sense, you're aware. It creates your awareness. Now, awareness here does not mean I can name the object. Awareness means that information has gone into the system. That information is immediately affected, if you will. It's immediately colored with pleasure, pain, or neutrality to the rest of the system. That information comes through either the physical pain, pleasure operating.
Nice connection
and,
there.
And that, or the mental narratives that also.
To the affect chart. There's like a chart of that.
Oh, they were always together.
Yeah.
In my head, anyway.
No, they were like the two main charts forever.
So that's how that feeds into that. So all of this information also is colored by pain, pleasure, and neutrality, and that feeds in. The affect chart shows how that feeds into the building of the narrative, which you see as the objects and types and whatever in the memes being put to use, if you will. The meme here is what correlates with the affect chart proximity complex, the memeplex. It's the same bubble going across the charts.
Interesting.
So
just
affect
noticing
is there, and it's also there. Like those two charts would have like two connecting points into the other chart.
Notice how artifact, meme, and type are layers that are directly connecting to the mapper. But object and symbol, they connect differently to the mapper. They don't really.
No. Watch. So let's start with meme. Mapper to meme. How do we get a type? What is that? What is that mapper?
No, I get. Yeah.
Translator.
And it's
the same pattern. Mapper to type. That's
so is that go backwards?
You map the type to an object. That mapping is called the instantiator. It's just a little object-oriented speak.
We should. There should be a paragraph for this chart.
That's how you read this. That's how you read this cycle.
There should be a page.
Yeah, no,
which is.
I'm not saying no. I'm just saying yes to that, not ignoring it. But, I mean, it's just like
Right.
obvious.
Yeah, like obvious. This is protocol information that
But that's like how you
any
read
reader should be privy to.
So I get why it's initially confusing, but there's definitely a reason for the choice of this mapping. Because trust me, I tried other concepts for mapping this, and this is the only one that gives me enough freedom to just like break out of like these siloed categories. Like this allows me to just like it's totally meta.
And
It's self meta.
Yeah. We're describing a very dynamic space, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So, I forget what segued into the brain chart, but
We just like brains.
I'm glad. No, I was just like, this is just the way it's shaped. It looks like one.
Because this isn't the chart of a brain. But more like the feedback, the self-reference, self-reference. This is what when I discuss self-reference, I literally do not step away from that in any way, shape, or form. So when I talk about self, it's going to be this thing plugged into a narrative of some sort. And that narrative is going to be colored by the proximity complex.
Hey, I'm pretty sure I must have asked you like 3 times if you'll put arrows on this chart. But even better than arrows would be like the page-long description of. Okay, and what I was asking about is how do you describe signal? A signal comes in, the mapper is what's used.
The mapper is not a thing.
Wait,
remember?
Hold on.
I'm
gonna say it, and then you translate it.
Okay.
So with the mapper, a symbol is presented through the mapper.
Signal is the way to read that is the signal is mapped to a symbol.
Okay. Good. Yeah.
That mapping coming out from the mapper signal connection is called the converter.
Wait. No, you didn't go into converter yet.
No, I'm following the diagram piece by piece. So you have, how is a signal mapped? Well, okay, you have a signal is mapped to a symbol.
Right. We got that far.
So this is the mapping. What do you call this mapping to a symbol?
And I got that.
It's a converter.
Because when you, for those who don't know or haven't experienced this type of notology, whatever, the line going from signal to mapper, because there's a line coming off that relationship, it implies that the original 2 things connected are coming together somehow, and what forms off of that is another object
that qualifies it, right? So that's why when you qualify the mapping between symbol and signal, that when you qualify the line between mapper and signal that goes to symbol, you get a converter, because that's what's naming which mapper we're talking about.
Okay,
and I use these kind of terms arbitrarily.
That
here,
part I don't get, because let's go on. We got a sense combines with a symbol and awareness arises.
Okay, that's an offshoot.
Where is this thing? You know, every transition, whatever, has to be like that.
So awareness simply speaks to the fact that your neurochemical operating system is working with it. It's not ignoring it. So you know how like sometimes a symbol is a negation or a signal is a negation of another signal and nothing happens?
Sure.
So this is like, okay, we're ignoring all of that. And awareness is speaking to the thing that actually do keep resonating. That's all that's saying, which is why it's a small offshoot. That is connected with affect, which is its own offshoot.
Because you want to jump right to artifact next as the thing,
So
thing being there.
Yeah, you pick back up from awareness to artifact
usually you can make the connection from symbol directly to artifact,
Right.
but here we did not.
So yeah, we need like a page write up of like just describing each link. Each link, just describe
Yeah.
it.
So apart from what I said about this diagram earlier, the only thing to note is that there are a couple of offshoots that are significant enough to be mentioned. I forget the rhetoric behind canvas selection and direction, but it has more to do probably with
I tried long ago. I tried to share the live stream. Eon obviously he found us without any assistance, but I ended up sharing the chat for the YouTube. I don't know. Maybe that would get people there. I don't know, it might work, but it didn't pull up like a preview. What did he say? I've got confused. Oh, he did jump on. Go to the latest
acknowledged.
analytics. See how faithful Eon's been. Oh, he's still there. No, is that just us?
You're a jerk. Could be. But yeah, like there are small offshoots in the diagram that I didn't go into because they didn't really add much to my explanation. Like for example, it doesn't add much to like.
I do have it here.
I guess like the one offshoot to explain how it connects with affect, with awareness, and all of that stuff is significant enough to mention. But the whole direction, canvas, and
What did Eon see something? Oh, we missed his chat. Sorry, buddy. No, he must have responded to the brain chart just now, probably, or recently. Always convoluted, yeah. Intimidated to ask about it. Well, yeah, it's like how do you even connect? How do you know how to connect? It's a two-part effort, right?
all right, Ian, if you're still listening, I'm clearly just tuning into what you just said. I'll reiterate the chart. Just
Write down an explanation of the charts.
I'll write it. I might write it down, but let me at least talk
And a
it
birthday
through.
present. Happy birthday, Eon.
Oh shit, it's your birthday? I didn't realize you meant today as that. If it is, happy birthday for sure.
If it is either belated or early.
Yeah, I have no idea. I had no idea, sorry. Alright, let's just step through like
Such a great idea, though.
let's just step through the first couple of steps, and hopefully it'll become much more easy to pick up after the fact. Right? Like, so first things first. The word mapper in the center of this diagram is like the most abstract notion of this whole diagram, and is the thing that is least concrete as a result about this diagram. So it's more there to like keep concept in mind than anything else. The actual chart should be followed like this. You start with signal, you look at symbol, you go to artifact, meme, type, object, and then right back to it.
Okay, so what you're describing here is the flow of the chart. You start with signal on the left, and you move through your major layers. Each of these, symbol is a layer, so signal, symbol. If you look at the neurochemical operating system
Yeah,
layers,
that's what these are.
we're following that. We're going from signal, which is your central point in the top left. We move through symbol, follow that all through to artifact, follow that up through meme, type, object.
Correct.
That's
So
the flow of
and
the chart.
and then kind of you can cut off there, but you can see it follows through back to signal and all of that. But that's the more complicated aspect. Now back to the mapper. The whole concept of a mapper is to just say that there's a mapping between all of these layers we just went through. So how to identify those mappers by some terminology, again, arbitrarily chosen by me, simply to just like keep a picture in mind in the best way possible and not to repeat.
The word mapper?
Yeah, not to repeat conceptual words. So converter, converter is one mapper.
We've always
transformer is another mapper.
worked very hard on
Yeah. So
terminology or
It's-
the wording.
So I'm just saying, so instead of thinking of like the word mapper, you should think about converter, you should think about transformer, you should think about executor, instantiator, translator, controller. Those are the actual mappers. The word mapper simply says to us that that's what they are. So how to read this diagram
Wait,
then?
is it? What's even on the screen right now? Why is it like that? Well, Ian, he has the image, I'm sure, but so is it? Oh, it got scrolled. Got scrolled. Sorry. Just wanted to double check that we're on on target here with the image. Okay, so
Okay.
part on, carry on.
So again, to reiterate,
Apologies. This is, we should post it in the chat. Shouldn't we?
yes. Okay, can I?
Yes, we won't do that now, or I'll do it from my phone.
Just a black screen, Ian said.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I noticed. I was checking on my phone and it was like that.
Alright, let's. Okay.
Apologies. Just trying to get a good.
Third time's the charm, right?
Yep.
Alright, again, let's go back over the basics. Start with the word signal, move to symbol in your head, to artifact, to meme, to type, to object. Those are the major.
Do you want me to like move the laptop this
no,
way?
I want you to.
You're focused.
No, yes.
You're right into it.
So those are the neurochemical operating system layers that sit right in the middle of the stack. The idea of the mapper is to say that there's mappings between each layer and to give those mappers their own names. So you'll see that we have a mapping between a signal and a symbol. There's a line that goes from mapper to signal. That's called a mapping between them. A line that offshoots off of that mapping gives us the name of that, what it maps to, the symbol.
Right.
And before it reaches the symbol, we have another line that talks about that specific mapping and gives it a name, converter.
But you can't say before we reach the symbol. This is
No, I mean if you follow the line between there,
Yeah,
and then
okay,
you
yeah,
follow
you're
it like
following them.
this before you reach it from. So you're
Yeah.
following a line from signal to mapper. From that line, another line emerges. You
You know-
follow that line, and before you reach symbol, there's another offshoot coming to
Right.
it.
So you have to, I think, break this up into chunks. Talk
That's what I'm doing.
about, yeah, exactly. So like signals are mapped into symbols. Boom. That's a phrase, a chunk.
Yeah.
Okay. That mapping into symbol is blah
A
blah
conversion. By the converter.
Right. Good. Now symbols, whatever with sense, like then this would be another chunk. So can you just walk the map like that?
So okay, so
Chunk by chunk. Don't get
there is a small break to the cycle because technically speaking, the same pattern should follow to artifact, the same pattern should
Right.
follow to meme and type and object, and it does in general. But there's a small interjection in that we're introducing a word called sense. Sense here, like I just said earlier, is like the things that are actually bubbling up rather than getting negated. So for example, you know how in logic you can have a plus and a minus and you get a zero kind of a thing, and that doesn't send out any information. So sense in this perspective is like is all the signals that are arising as opposed to the ones that are canceled.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
It's referencing things that pass a certain threshold of interestingness. Or whatever.
So symbols
Come into the awareness.
So the symbols that are combined together give off signals, and together everything coming from the body itself as well, not just brain thinking kind of thing. You have like this whole tapestry of what we call awareness.
Pardon.
The things, awareness is like a catch-all term to say what is going forward from this sygnalic world, as opposed to what is stamped out, cancelled, ignored. Right? Otherwise, you'd be overwhelmed by sensory input.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a conceptual break to give us the concept of awareness, and that awareness
Mhm.
is imbued with what we call affect, and affect is the calculation of pleasure, pain, or
Yeah.
neutrality.
There's an often evoked meditation for awareness. Just become aware of the feelings in your body, whether there's a pain here, there, that sensation. These are all background things.
To be
that
clear,
get
those still
filtered.
appear up here. So this is like trying to become isomorphic
Right.
between these two bubbles, and I'm pointing between
Right,
object
right,
and
right.
awareness. And
Yep,
what I'm
you're
saying
right.
is like you need an isomorphism
You're right
there.
to say that. We're not even in the narrative world yet.
Yeah. So the point here is that we're trying to say is that before you even get into the interpretive side of anything, or the active side of thinking or cognitive, when the shit's bubbling up through your neurological operating
Mhm.
system, it's already painted through with the color of pain, pleasure, and neither.
Right.
It's
This
already there.
Also, related note, this chart is almost cut in half from top to bottom, with the awareness area, not awareness, but like the
Active
neural,
and active
yeah,
and
active
passive.
and passive, sure. Yeah, like where we would see an object like a couch or this or that.
So affect is passive. All of the affect stuff that we're talking about is in the passive phase, informed by
Right.
the active
And
phase.
by passive, it means you don't have control over it. It just happens, and you're not become aware yet.
Well, like feeling that something is touching you. You don't get to control. Yeah, I mean, I can stop touching the point in my hand, obviously with this hand, but I don't get the choice of
Right,
not
yeah.
feeling the effect of this contact. So
Yep.
this is all Buddhist stuff.
Just and in an instant, like a lightning bolt, through this mapper. This mapper idea is kind of like a synchronistic
This is
representation.
how this is isomorphic to that. There's isomorphic to this. The path of isomorphism.
It implies the synchronistic lightning bolt, in which it all happens at the same time, virtually, right?
Right. Well, remember, we're not moving through time in this diagram. We're moving through complexity.
Right.
So the signal and the symbol and the artifact, they're all occurrences of in the same.
And what I meant in the
moment.
lightning bolt happens in a split second, metaphorologically.
Yeah.
It's
so
something that's in stasis.
So there's a motion that can happen through this diagram, and then there's also a stasis way to look at this diagram. You can look at it how a signal evolves into an object and becomes another signal temporarily in a temporal sense, and
Right.
also in a synchronic sense of like how they're all at that at the same time.
Right. So this is a synchronic diagram of
Both. I think I misspoke earlier. Its most useful introduction is synchronic. Just look at it not as through a temporal lens, but just a complexity lens. Then add to that a temporal lens and see how that move from signal
It's
to an
sort
object
of-
and back to signal.
it's sort of meta.
Or before it can go from signal to symbol, or from signal to symbol to artifact to signal, or all the way through to meme and then to signal. On and on it goes. So every mapper, as you note in this diagram, is always pointing back way back to signal. So no matter which layer you're jumping, that jump itself, like the meaning of this jump, is reintroduced back into the system as another
through that
possible set of signals.
The outside, all those outside lines.
So this loop can undercut itself at each step, right? So when
This
we're
is
talking,
what makes it difficult to map.
yeah. So when we're talking about, so if you're looking at layers like this, it's easier for me to measure.
Yes. Okay.
Look, you have a stack here, but you have a loop here, then you have a loop with this, and then you have a loop between, and you have a loop with three, and you have a loop between this one, between this one, between this one, between all three, between two of them, between these two. The strange loops just like get, each time you add a layer, it's like an exponential jump in how many loops you're having.
Yeah.
Because even though they're sending signals, those signals could be representative of either symbols or artifacts, or like they could go to any level of complexity just before yours and including yours, and potentially trigger further complexities up top without even recognizing such that also will push down.
with more symbolic presentation.
Correct.
That it doesn't even account for.
Yes.
So
And this is
causality
the
goes out the window.
potentiality. This is the potentiality of this of modeling in this way.
Yeah.
It just assumes assumes.
Well, this
Not-
is what
not much.
this is what how those layers are, and if you have this picture in your head, which is I probably think is why there's some struggle into understanding what the fuck I'm talking about sometimes. It's because in my head, that's the image I've been using, right? Like not just like the actual picture
Right.
here.
And this
When I
is
speak,
a
I'm talking about all of this.
this is a small
It's a very important
let's
nuance.
call it pitfall of temperament related issues for you.
Sure. Now, just to like
You good over there?
for completeness sake, I'm going to comment on very briefly on canvas selection and direction.
Okay, yep. So and then we'll wrap up the bottom area, take a break in a bit.
That's fair. Yeah, the only reason that those are there is because once you built up an artificial landscape, if you will, from the artifacts
Actually,
to let the memes run.
I feel like I remember these discussions,
you create a canvas.
but we haven't even gone through artifact yet. And you're already talking about.
Well, yes, but if you take the same reasoning that I used for symbol, signal, and mapper, and converter, and move over one spot,
Okay.
you have.
Yeah, I noticed there's an offshoot which isn't really there with the upper ones. Like this automation is being built in.
Yeah, so this is still the passive stuff because like once you have your artificial thing set up, we call the whole thing a canvas, right? And in that canvas you have a selected focal point, like your focus point, and then the direction in which it's going to move through that canvas, and that together creates the memeplex with the central meme and the peripherally.
This is like
so that's just the activated aspect of the artifact. So the written program running, which happens at the same time.
It's interesting how this offshoot is. So first comes like feelings and all that, like with affect and sense. Kind of like like the feelings of good, bad. But then we go up a layer, and now we're like, okay, what is my reality right now? Where am I moving through?
Yeah. So because of the affect, the good and the bad, and the resultant canvas, the selection and direction are kind of like correlated through it, and the narrative is going to be the thing that connects everything together. What is going to be, which artifact is going to be selected to focus on, and which direction through the canvas. Transformer.
Because I'm missing a piece of like where is the memeplex and the narrative
the transformer is the thing that takes the awareness plus affect.
Like there's not a narrative yet at this point. Or is there?
The symbol plus sense becomes awareness. Awareness is imbued with affect. Affect and awareness together become an artifact. The mapper for that is the transformer. So basically, the mapper for symbol to artifact becomes a transformer. It's just there's more shit involved in that one transformation. So not only do you imbue it with pain, pleasure, and neutrality, you're also given like so you build up a world of like an artificial world.
Yeah.
And then you plant somewhere.
This is how
plant your self-reference somewhere in it.
So
and then you direct it somewhere on that map. That's what it's saying.
This is an automatic facility given to you so that you can have a snap reaction in the moment to any kind of sense, that whether it feels good, bad, and you're automatically positioned by your brain. I am here. I can do this, and actually the decision is made.
Yeah, it's in the passive part. However, that decision is made through the narrative coming up from here.
Well, it's lifted up through that, and this is where we have potential to.
So, as you can imagine, when you're like a newborn, this isn't very well developed whatsoever.
No. Right.
You'll have the affect part of it, but the direction is going to be random.
It's really interesting to make that distinction as automatic, and I feel like I've heard it or talked about it a lot lately. with like the ability of executive decision to have an executive function about you is the first step is to basically when you feel an impulse
Right.
to jump on that and be like, okay, now let's think about
And here's
this.
the irony. You're talking about executive decisions, which is not impulsive, but you immediately are taught to intercept impulse with it. This is saying about the same thing. You're only going to get the impulse from the narratological perspective because that impulse is going to
Right.
be where you've been planted into the artificial thing and where
Right.
you've been directed to by that narrative before you can even make the decision to react. So you're
Right.
already thinking, like, you're not thinking that way. The world you're presented is already directed you in some
Right.
sense.
So you're agreeing that this is a good model to present to somebody, as in we get impulses
Yeah.
and we should look at them instead of just doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
And to clarify that, look how it's happening in the passive parts of the neurochemical
Right.
operating system.
Yeah.
Because
I was
the
just noting
artifact
that,
is something
like, that's
that's
pretty.
built. The artifact is something that's built passively. It's the meme that is the active. So written program, running program. That
Right.
they happen all at the same time is beside the point. That's the rest of the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just saying that once a program is running, it's already got a direction and it's got a focus. That's the central meme against the entire memeplex,
Yeah.
and where
Yeah,
that
yeah,
central
yeah.
meme is going to
And
go.
this comes back to that big moment that we talked about, where you can be running your whole life just taking this impulse and it lines up perfectly with your whole reality and everything is just
On autopilot.
in complete automation, and then suddenly you see it as this moment of it's something that you're experiencing outside of that, where you're looking at it, right? This moment is
If that information feeds back in that you're looking at a moment. Like, you have to give the narrative of I am looking at a moment
right.
to realize that you're looking at a moment. It's kind of like that's hyperstition in a
And
nutshell.
it comes from this self-modeling. Like, if you've discovered a piece of yourself which is there now, which involves you're a being who creates worlds and lives in them.
And if I may ask, if you were like to look at this model, all it makes you do is that. To try and follow that self model. Like, it gives you a picture of a model, you follow it, and wait a minute, I'm doing that. This is not the picture. Fuck the picture. This is like just like the experience after the experience after the experience. That's what it's supposed to do. It's just
Right.
a mapping of experiences rather than like there's a thing out there that's like a prescribed program.
The meta, yeah, it's a weird. We're getting into
Which it is.
we're getting into charlatanism topic,
And
as
how,
in
and how to get
as
by,
in
how
what
to bypass it.
as in how to detect charlatanism, as in what do they not talk about ever,
And how to not be one.
right?
Basically, not how to, like, how can you even use it to not be.
So with that, we shall take a short break.
So yeah, the original, so segue of a segue that is very brief, I promise. The original motivation behind this chart was the 5 aggregates from Buddhism.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's actually what I was trying to
With
capture.
canvas and all that. That's why I remember
So yeah,
canvas.
the original.
Monitoring.
That's funny. Yeah, so that was the original intent of this diagram,
We
to
even
try to
used
capture.
canvas.
And so yeah, so if you remember things like it has form, it has feeling, it has perception, fabrication, and consciousness.
Oh, that's the dead. What damn? That camera doesn't work. That one's broken too. Man, time for an overhaul of our system, man. It's going to be
It's
good.
coming, it's coming. I
Gonna
just
be
don't have
good.
enough to invest right now.
Likewise, but we're working on
But
it.
no, I will have the potential soon.
The power. Yeah, we're on this one, yeah.
But yeah, like, so the entire idea behind this diagram was to just try to explain Buddhism to myself in some sense. And this is the end result, actually. And so a lot of the conversations that we've had about
It actually looked
neurofeedback-
quite different when you. I think this is my interpretation of the. Like I just redrew it, but I'm just saying, this is even further from that. Like you,
Yeah.
I think you drew a chart, and then I tried to make my own.
Yeah, so now that you see how to follow it, the topography
Yeah,
makes more sense.
and I haven't looked at this chart in a while since I did the other charts, right?
So
like
it,
in 3D, it's been
like it does make sense to make a step up
Yeah.
scenario between, like, say, signal, symbol, artifact, meme, type, and object. Like, it makes sense to make that into a
as
rising
a
spiral.
stepping thing, yeah. It's a
But the
very
rest of them are
difficult-
like supportive and more constructive to what's how
The
you
big
get there.
challenge in mapping this or modeling the map is that many things are coming back to signal. So it's like you've got all this happening, but on top of that, you have this extra dimension where everything comes back to this one point.
Yeah, and it reinterprets
So it's
the
like,
whole
how do you
thing
even-
and changes the whole thing real time. Yeah.
How do you even?
How do you even? Yeah, it's hard. That's why I'm like, you're probably better with the flat one. Like, I like the idea of the steps. They do show the whole layer concept, right?
So
How
this
you-
is supposed to be the same chart. And
remember, the center is like the abstract of it, the most abstracted element of the entire diagram.
Yeah,
the only
like
reason
this-
the word mapper is there is to say that converters and executors and blah 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 are all mappers.
like this,
It's just there.
this
for
should probably, if signal was like above, connecting down like very sharply,
that. Which it is. That's the strange loop.
right? But if it was done
You,
like
you,
that,
you need to do Escher style art where you're like defying the third dimension by just utilizing the two. So look up Escher's staircase
perhaps.
or waterfall. No, seriously. Look, load up the image. I want to show it to the audience. Please
Um,
pull up a browser.
how do I do that?
Just go to Google Images. Type in ESCH
Waterfall.
and go into an image.
Oh, yeah. Just wait for the computer to stop crashing.
Thank you, computer. Blow one up.
Open image.
Just click on one. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Now zoom in to get the wonderful details.
My Firefox got really shitty and died, so now I'm using this piece of
Edge.
crap.
Now follow the water.
Yeah, it goes up. There it is.
See how, like, being drawn in 2 dimensions gives you like the room to trick the eye and what the third dimension is doing.
Yeah.
Like the columns, for example.
It's possible.
Well, the architecture is not possible. Is not possible. But that's the idea. So this diagram works in the same fashion. So signal is this like the dropping of the water, right? This sets up the whole thing, but it's its own waterfall somehow, and yet there's no. That's the strangeness of this loop. Like you can't logically follow it, and yet it makes sense. In your, the pieces make
Sure.
sense, the together does not.
Right.
And yet it does, and yet it does not.
So I just I don't feel helped here.
So you can't do this in 3D. You need 2 dimensions to draw 3 dimensions.
No, I'm suggesting you
Weird.
can. Man.
Well, not in
Not in
Euclidean physics kind of a
not in a
situation.
small amount of time. It'd be like, well, you're looking here, yeah. I don't
Because
know.
the signal has to be simultaneously above and below. And above and below every layer.
You just have to be able to ignore one dimension at a time, I think.
Yeah.
Like that's why I put straight lines here, so you could ignore those. Those are the ones returning back to signal. Everything curved is like the map. The rest of the map. And it's all there, but it's about perspective. Like, see how sometimes you don't have a good view of certain jumps, and
Yeah. At any rate, I'm not sure this is like.
it may or may not ever work.
This is a discussion about 3D
Well,
art
we can
rather
go
than
down
about
this-
the fucking
we
signal.
can go down the
So
slide.
I'm like,
Come back to symbol.
come on, man.
Boom.
It's fun, but
I want to go again. I want to go again. Let me. Where
stop it.
did I go?
You're torturing me.
All right.
Back to
Yeah. So this
what matters.
this is a pretty old school discussion so
What I
far.
love about this is another observation I just made. Check out the bottom versus the top, so the passive versus the active.
Yeah.
Everything is happening that can like determine choice or whatever is in the passive side, and the active side is pretty much automated throughout.
Presentation. Normally,
Isn't that interesting?
but with the strange loop, right? Each affects the other.
There's that in this diagram, what you're seeing is that all of the important things, the decision making, how you react to things, how everything is happening, is passive.
Yeah.
And only after that's all assembled, you get to the memeplex and the execution of the next step of the narrative.
Right, but we do have that ability to slow it down and stop it and say, "Yeah, I don't like this narrative. Give me another one."
Right. But without an appropriate model living in the meme type object.
Well, you would never
landscape.
even ask that question.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So the isomorphism has to be artificially introduced. Hence, we've had this discussion before, but the model is inserted as an artifact, and this is why. So the artifact is inserted, the canvas and the selection and the direction get affected. That's what's affecting the memeplex. Again, passive in its
Right.
in its
Of course, yeah. Because the media has to be expressed upon, and then in further cycles it can be acted upon again.
Conversely, like for a score point for the system, guess what it's hijacking when it's advertising? It inserts artifacts into the narrative
Mm-hmm.
such that the canvas and the selection and
Like
the
puzzle
direction
pieces
are moved.
get manipulated.
By the time you're in the memeplex, you're already directed.
Mhm.
It's the same concept. It's literally reiterating the same concept, but just breaking it down into where the passive, where the active. And I like that distinction. It's not drawn on the map. It's
No.
definitely recognized
I
in
just
that.
noticed that there is kind
in
of
the
a
stack-
bottom and a top.
In the stack, you can see it, but in this
Right.
It's not really focused on
Yeah, right.
that. It's just focused on like, here's how that goes.
Yeah, I've never looked
Complexity.
at this image with that thought.
Yeah, it's actually useful to like break it down the middle like that and just like look at it passive and active, and to notice that the active is actually quite passive in its structure, and all the decision making is in the
Right.
passive, which is the most active element of it. Fuck us up the ass, basically.
Well, there's a key to every lock.
The key this is pointing to is what meditation has been pointing to, and what our initial attempt at describing
Feedback
meditation. Feedback observation, yes. But do you remember my discussion about like
breaths and meditations for
no, trying to like control the mediation layer from spectacular to hyper to isomorphic.
like going from concrete to abstract to mimetic
So
in representation. You're going down the layers.
So yeah, but to be
Of
more
this
clear
noise.
in the context of this chart, if we were to take the top layer of it is more automated than it seems, even though that's where the executive function happens.
Right.
The meditation is saying, okay, the normal context you start from, like assuming this chart, is you go all the way to object, and you notice that in the spectacle, right? Like you go full all the way to the object. So that's spectacular mediation. The mediation layer is the artifacts, right? So spectacular mediation is just like it running as it's running. So your mind is not self-reflecting, it's reacting to the environment around it.
Normal, right?
Hypermediation, still fast, but not quite as fast as spectacular, is introducing the artifacts of I'm noticing, I am thinking about this. So it's the meta thoughts. Basically, I saw a tree. Oh, I'm thought about myself. I recognize that I saw a tree. So it's not just reacting, it's like responding to the response, and to that response, and to that response.
Okay.
And isomorphic mediation is aligning that the mapping of what those responses are, like how do you identify what you just responded to the model itself. So the model is an artifact that you're comparing to, but in doing so, you're creating the literal isomorphism that the model is speaking about, and so the artifacts that get reintroduced back into this hypo narrative are closer and closer and closer to alignment with isomorphism.
It's kind of weird. This reminds me of the
and that's how I describe meditation.
The cognitive alignment window.
That's what it's for.
Of two main states of it. One is normal, and the other we've called debug, or what I forget what other names. So this is, but in normal mode, like you said,
spectacular mediation.
You don't really. You're just in it. When you shift the window,
it's hypermediation.
Your fundamental reality moves from the abstract. In other words, like your reality is the whole of the possibilities of types of things that are out there that exist in the world. Instead of that being your concrete reality, it becomes the mimetic, which is a relation in which those concrete things have a relationship over time with the narratives that they encounter, that they're part of. They're built up of narratives, so that way of looking at it sees a dance between the concrete and the abstract to develop the abstract.
I think I have an easier...
Rather than abstract itself being the end-all, be-all.
I think I have an easier way to say this. So it's like when you're sitting there...
It must be.
When you're sitting there, you're looking at the screen, you're not telling yourself, breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Right? That just happens. It's just something that happens to you, and that's fine.
Unless
it's part of your body is aware of it, but it's not becoming part of your thought process. But now your thought process is focusing. But then
breathe in, breathe out.
then your thought process is now focused on actual things that are happening. So breathing in and breathing out are still abstract artifacts, they're artificial thoughts. Concept of breathing is pretty expensive. However,
Okay.
now your mental model is now trying to follow it, and then you're breaking down the experiences of breathing in and breathing out
Now
into
you're-
its own distance.
Now you're floating on a boat
and then
in the ocean.
slowly but surely, the artificial model and the model of the experience, the experiential model, begin to line up
Mhm.
with having a symbology that reflects
Right.
experience,
Yeah.
which
By-
is model
by
speaking. What
experiential
I'm talking about.
model, you're talking about a raw symbol, basically, like things have been bunched up and accumulated.
So it's going from I'm breathing in to like I feel the flow of air going through my throat, through my nose, through my, like breaking it all down and further and
These
further
are symbols,
and further.
are they not? You're
And
trying.
yes, those are symbols, but they become more and more and more and more isomorphic with the reality that they are trying to represent. They're getting closer and closer to just the raw what is happening versus what does it mean. Like breathing means not suffocating.
Yeah. So in other words, you're
But
saying
air going in,
it's
it's a
it can
sensation.
become a mental exercise to continue to break down the logic
And those are the mental
components of.
And
of
those are the
something.
mental exercises that we have been introduced
Rather
to
than-
Buddhism, for example, and the
Yeah.
rest.
But it's hard. It's always hard to point to that.
No, it is
Yeah.
hard to point to that. This is one more attempt to like break it down as to what the fuck we're
For
getting
the
to.
scientismistic
Yeah,
mind.
yeah.
I love this. The
And
NCOS and all that.
And so, how do you go from hypermediation to full isomorphic mediation? So, conceptually speaking, is when the memes and the artifacts become isomorphic. There becomes no difference in the translation layer between the two, right? So, what's passive and what's active then lines up.
This, yeah, over time, like you're talking about meditation to
Yeah, the practice of
create
it.
isomorphism naturally, not to be
Just
told what this or that
So,
is.
so you
but you
slow,
experience
so you
it.
slow into hypermediation, and then you transform the hypermediation into an isomorph. It can never go below hyper. Like you're still going to use artifacts to create memes, but the
Right.
more they become isomorphic, the less there's a distinction between the passive and the active sides of this chart.
Right. Yeah.
And that same isomorphism is a breakdown back to the animism that preceded the fucking
And we
buildup,
call this the feedback observation
Method.
method.
and of which we have several examples.
Right. I just sorry, sidetrack. This is the first live stream for Portamon Dev meeting for me since I was unbanned from SOTS. High five.
Didn't you already have some kind of
Still didn't
altercation
Get
with Geiger?
rebanned. Oh yeah.
I don't even know what that was because I missed that conversation entirely.
No, just we ended up, it's like a speed bump in the road. It's there, you have to get over it. Because we had such like kind of bad blood in the past, like this is talking 4 years ago, and just me with the whole community, right? Even though I came back and I said, I apologized, like I know I was, poking shit and crazy, and anybody, if we have any beefs, we can bring them up, but I don't feel like we need to, and I want to just move forward, give one of those intro messages.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes out, right, like the people, you poke in that from history, like there's raw wounds and all that, so of course it came back up, but
I actually had a positive experience like that recently too.
we ended up just like fully talking through it, and yeah.
It's hard to reconcile like the abstraction of thinking about things and like the actual events that are affecting specific individuals in our lives that go through shit because of these things.
I think I wasn't skilled enough at the time to be able to
We probably still aren't.
to go through it.
We are probably still not.
To go through that experience without ruffling extra feathers, without hurting people, right? And now, like, well, I just I prove it by I feel like I'm
Growth.
I'm wiser, a little bit more relaxed, chilled out, and all that. I don't need to be fighting about anything. So that's the default kind of thing, right? And so it went from there. So Geiger was right to test me again on those things, those old sore points, and see if I'm still ready to
What did he ask?
ready
I
to
totally
react.
missed the entire conversation, so I'm curious. What were you?
I forget. It was just it became into like
What's the gist?
the politics of the left-right stuff. Like the gist was I was claiming. Well, is actually
Claiming.
claiming yes that the I threw out something like the left doesn't exist and it just recuperated whatever goodness it is recuperated into the fascist right, and it's all so therefore it's all basically politics.
Right,
Engagement
like
in politics.
our expression of
Engagement
it.
in politics is basically just a fascist exercise, and who based on who is either the new fascist or the old fascist, and there's that sort of general. That's the left-right thing all through history. Probably was just like that. Left always would have great ideas about human emancipation and freedom and all this, and um, the right would sweep it up in as a way of
Selling it back to you.
garnering support.
It's
and
like
all
selling
that.
air back to you.
Yeah, right. So which
Yeah.
is tough. So it's tough for me to get into that with our past about all this and
So-
that. So what Geiger ended up doing was saying, putting his instead of us dancing around, put his foot down and said, I am, basically I am a, he identified, I think, socialist, and said a specific phrase that the means of production have to be seized by either the working
Sure,
class, and that the elite is like needs to be punished. And so this, which I get, and I get that, and it takes a
Yeah,
lot of
it
guts.
has a problem.
Takes a lot of guts to like state, like to just say, okay, here's my platform, basically, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to pull a platform out of people.
I can see the problem with it.
And so I
Sure.
respect that 100%. The problem, and I tried bringing it up, this was part of it, is that, of course, you were just thinking right now, the elite are not a group of people that are different from us
Right.
in their
Yeah.
basic constitution
Once you begin,
in this system.
the thought that the elite need to be punished also creates the circumstance in which the reverse is happening, and now the group doing the punishing is the elite. Otherwise,
They'll get punished, maybe, or some, yeah.
no. So what I mean is that as soon as like you have a group exercising punishment over another group, that's the elite group. So if you're trying to like think that
Fight fire with fire.
if you're thinking this way, you're not really changing the problem in the first
Right.
place, which is one group
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
another
yeah.
group of people
And then
what to do.
I got completely lambasted, made absolute fun of, for saying that elites are fundamentally, as people, no different than you or I.
Right, and you're trying to relate it to us.
I just got completely roasted, but yeah.
Well, it's like it's a simple, it's like those conversations we have with, say, Jordan Peterson or Elon Musk or whatnot. You do bring up the fact that like they're still part of the system, which I totally understand, and usually I'm confused as to why you would need to convince me of that. The problem also is that there is the person, and then there's the caricature of
yeah.
the person, and that's the only thing on display, even by the choice
Yeah.
of said person.
So
And that barrier, that bubble, if you will, of
yeah,
disconnect is not that penetrable, to be honest.
I probably am softened on that. I don't disagree so much with going after a caricature like an idol who people recognize as a lifted up, basically a demigod.
You
Right?
need to give
Jordan
myth,
Peterson is a demigod.
You need to give myth more credit for acting as a reality for people. Because
Right.
if you recall, the definition of myth, according to the model, at the very least, is the narrative that somebody believes. So you already are going across a very problematic barrier, because there's the narrative is reinforced by that belief, which is another narrative, which is another narrative, which is another narrative. It just recycles itself into itself.
What's the trope like?
And so you're not going to like.
You have to separate the ideology from the person and just talk about the ideology nicely.
Like you can't throw that shit into the wall and think and hope it sticks, because the wall is actually a food processor that's just going to throw shit. The exact same pile it always has been.
So it's just like it's not going to stick, if you will.
Yeah,
It's like taking a shit into the sewer pipe.
I got lost, honestly, but I don't think like anybody like Jordan Peterson is going to be like really mentally hurting because people don't like him or there's trolls out
There's
there or
Jordan
whatever.
Peterson, the human concoction of cells.
People call him an idiot, whatever.
Nobody,
Yeah, that's a
nobody
mythological thing, right?
Nobody knows that person.
No one will ever see him.
There's Jordan Peterson, the character that we see in our mythology.
Right, and this is all we have.
That's the only thing. That's the only narrative
I
we
think
will
a
get
lot of
through.
people agree that there's a line shouldn't be crossed in which you make something personal just because you recognize that person on the street and decide to throw a fist into their face.
But there's another problem. If that narrative makes the
Then
underlying
you could say,
unit so fucking dysfunctional that
you can say
it's
it was
just
brought
hurting
upon
people.
themselves.
It's just hurting people. There is some room
What
to
if
be
it's
said, like,
perceived
okay,
as hurt?
we need to like limit the ability of the physical impact from this thought to a degree. From this character, rather.
He will,
Not thought.
he'll
no.
get punched potentially or whatever. That
I'm not talking about trying to like meeting them with their own tool set. I'm talking about like trying to minimize their potential for expressing their mythology in the physical realm only.
by deleting them.
Well, no.
Just kidding.
What are you deleting? The character of the person. So there's that thing. So
Yeah.
if the character is
Like we fight in the space of ideas. That's what I think is
Like,
a cultural sort of
you
thing.
can't extinguish an abstraction as such, and you can't limit the abstraction to a single person either. So the solution isn't going to be like be violent against the person of Jordan Peterson just because the character of Jordan Peterson is, for lack of a better word, a fucking fascist.
Which, as we say, is out of control of anybody anyways. He can't freaking make a single dent in his own image. He can come up with new stuff and be more crazy.
No,
but
he can't.
Everyone's gonna have
He can't go either way.
inertia.
He also can't go either way. He can't become less of a Nazi, and he can't become more of a Nazi. Like, he's just that. Like, there's no. That's what the character is.
How are we defining that again?
Nazism.
It's
So
an appeal to a perfection of sort.
So
The one true Übermensch.
So the traditional Nazi
It often appeals to nature.
mythology is a sort of detachment from actual tradition, reinventing that tradition into a brand new mythology, pretending that that's the way it's always has been, and we've moved away from that, and we need a strong, authoritative structure to get us back on track. That's a general mythological narrative of Nazism.
Minus the first part, because they're not supposed to know that it came from somewhere to become the ideal perfection.
Well, yeah, you're
obviously
not going to admit to yourself that you reinvented the history to suit your needs. That doesn't come.
So some beautiful ideal from the past
that actually never existed, that we are trying to return to, and an authoritative structure to force the rest of humanity into that position.
Does Jordan Peterson want an authoritative structure?
Yes.
He
argues for authoritarianism with his.
I don't know.
I
did
lobsters
watch one video. Yeah, I think this is the lobster thing. Like
he's very much
he's
into.
Still on. He's on.
Oh yeah, he's very much into it. Like, and all he does is like there's these hierarchies of like top to bottom, and like it's always like this, and it's always the top is the lowest, and the bottom is the best, is the greatest, and like he doesn't have any nuance to that picture either. He always repeats it the same way.
Right, and that was in relation to like sexual attraction and partner selection.
No,
like that,
fighting between lobsters. So if you.
But I mean the metaphor, like he expands that.
The metaphor was that if you feed serotonin to a lobster, it becomes like I'm the biggest lobster there is.
Right.
Meanwhile, the reality behind that is that lobsters unlike humans, react to things like serotonin as we would to steroids.
No, but what was the whole thing? Like,
Um,
social, what did he project that onto? I thought that it was like mate selection is like the highest, is the, that's,
he
this
was
is how it
he
should
was
be,
connecting
or-
it to depression and being like outwardly, and he was trying to say like how there's a hierarchy of dominance as because of that, because lobsters dominate based upon how aggressive they are. So he connected
and,
like
and
this,
so that this is
this
natural for
direct-
humans because you can see
because it
happening.
happens in lobsters, and lobsters are so
Yeah.
old that it has to be part of
Something
the
like
ingrained
that.
evolution of all creatures on the
Right.
planet.
Right, and as if nothing can come later. It's just the cold history of
Progression.
of billions of years. It's always been like this.
Yes, nature. That's the appeal to nature that Nazism has. Like you can't break from the structure. It's very authoritative. It's always about being authoritative. By the way, it's always not. It's never about like how nature has choice or it's got options or
And
any of that.
Isn't
This is the only way.
As we talked about this before, that there's a kind of inherent unavoidableness of that in conservatism.
Right.
Which this is where
So that
we don't want to go overboard in saying no, never. Like there's reasons for things.
So take your normal conservatism that you approve of in a way, not the political conservatism that is expressed in the world.
We're talking about
our
the fact of having culture that worked over generations.
fundamental egalitarianism is the words I like to use for this position, because it's kind of those things, but it's also avoids stating that it's that.
So the fundamentalism is the conservative side, in which our structures are there for a reason, in which our life isomorphic with the body. That's why we have these APS structures, because there's an isomorphism down the stack.
A topic that is very easily covered by the words natural selection. If it didn't survive, it's because it wasn't fit into its natural environment.
Okay. Yep. And as an argument, you could say, do you agree or disagree with the existence of natural selection happening or not happening?
And egalitarianism would then correlate to the mutation side of
That's what the fundamentalist says.
Yeah, but
Egalitarianism says, do you think that it's always how you thought it was?
Sorry, before you say that, egalitarianism is like, okay, this kills whatever doesn't work. Is that a statement that says, do not mutate further?
No.
Exactly.
That's permitted.
That's the egalitarian side of it. So the interaction then becomes, options are laid out, some are eliminated. More options laid out, some are eliminated.
Right.
More options laid out, some are eliminated.
A
egalitarianism,
dance, if you will, between
and a fundamentalism.
two sides.
Egalitarianism and a fundamentalism. Neither is wrong. Neither is working against each other. They're mutually codependent.
Isn't this cycle? This is in the brain chart as well. The fundamentalism coming below, as in these are the artifacts of what's actually freaking happening.
Right.
And above the egalitarianism, like, well, it could be
this,
it could be this, it could be this.
Well, this is the
try
story.
again. Maybe it's something else.
And the funny thing is that it's passive, but the reason it affects it in such a way as chaotically as it does it's passive in its own way, but the reason it's said to be active and affecting the quote-unquote actual passive side of it is because it's rised up to narratives coming from you, me, the other person, the collective itself, right? And so every time you go through the cycle and go back through reiteration through the senses, you're not just being fed just what you got from your brain model, if you will, here. Like imagine 1,000 of them just throwing that information out into the ether
Within your own
APS,
APS, creating these mirror reflections of so many different types of people out there, and
and actually having many different types of people doing that again and over and over and over
Mhm.
again. So it's like this brain chart times infinity, basically, trying to affect other specific elements of itself, if you will.
Right.
So whether it boils down to a single person or a group or a part of a
And
person's
we
life,
each have our
it's
own
just like,
point in that experience.
right, so this brain chart isn't limited to a single person's experience. This is like, it's not just the
Right.
artifacts laid out by, say, your neurological operating system. It's the fact that you brought a table into this room and a couch, and now I have a look at this environment and I perceive it as a sitting space. But that manipulated my
Right.
this part
And yeah,
because the artifacts are there.
the mythological as well, which we share, we can interpret it bubble up from below. The mythological portions, like whether we believe in this type of, whether it's a fascist, socialist, capitalist, whatever it
It's
is,
going to
ism,
resonate with affect, for example.
different complete
Like,
configurations.
if you hear a sentence and you're egalitarian, you're going to hear pleasure. If you hear the same sentence and you're a fundamentalist, you might hear pain. So
Right.
affect is affected by
Automatically.
the same topside process
And
coming through.
pain, why? You're gonna F you, or you're ready to act already through the artifact, the transformer, canvas,
Right.
selection, direction.
And it's always incidental to that moment.
Context.
And this is why that diagram has been in the center of my thinking this whole time, and why I keep presenting it. And I'm so sorry to be confused as to why nobody actually knew about it.
No. This is just remember. This is your temperament issue. It's always been. You assume people don't know.
No. In this case, I'm a little bit taken aback because this is so far back.
Right.
And it's been so used by me.
But also,
I never questioned.
But in the times it was used by you, did you say, "Oh, by the way, I'm using this chart to when I say this word, I'm using this chart"?
I would usually do my own thing, and I type a bunch
Right.
of things that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Present a bunch of
This,
diagrams
again,
that should show what the fuck I'm talking about.
This is a skill of education.
There is a skill to be had.
Teaching, I
No.
guess.
There's two skills in education. One of the teacher, but there is a skill to be a student.
Right.
And I think we're catching on to both finally.
Here we are. And with that, we shall be right back. Potentially, though. Disk base. Alright, well, it's still streaming. And we shall be right back.
it was really good to like not only
This was an old school chat today. It felt very
yeah,
throwback-ish.
it was really good to like just
Thanks to Eon for
reorient.
the prompt too. Man. Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
But which I, by the way, was thinking, we didn't have chat up, so I can still see what. I don't know if he was still going. Yeah, he probably. Yeah, no. His brain is shutting down. Context, so much clarification, qualification. Chart itself dissolves out of its own. Okay, okay. Oh yeah, so sorry, Eon, if you're still here. We didn't have. This is a thought that I had. We didn't have the this chat visible to us.
I'll blame Brian for
That's
this one.
I do apologize for that.
Can't see what it's doing at like within it. So, how did we summarize this?
I don't know if we did.
No, we did. We have a passive and an active section in the chart.
So wait, can I try? That's
Can I finish?
cool.
Can I finish?
Okay.
Another aspect of it that we eliminated is that it is basically explaining what self-reference means in the context of model itself, so that whenever we use that terminology, it's no longer confusing. This is the chart to go to and actually
I need more
explain that to
clarification
yourself.
on that, but that's awesome. Yeah.
Signals referring back to signals. Signals referring back to the self-reference is the looping
Right.
that occurs as you go up a layer. So if you go up a layer, you loop back into it. If you go up 2 layers, you loop back 1 layer, both layers, and altogether, and then the first layer again. And as soon as you add another layer, the loops increase in size. So you always have like these loops that send signals back and self-refer to itself. So
Right, but I think to me this chart as a self-reference, like the idea of this representing self-reference, you can't. There's no point in having any other model of yourself other than what is self, because self is an object. Okay, how do I define what an object is?
No, this is something different. This is like a Buddhist argument right there. This is going to tell you that self-reference doesn't actually amount to anything except a processing back that is
No,
inverted back onto
I get
itself.
that, but in the initial approach to this material of a normal person trying to model their self.
No, you wouldn't start with that phrasing at all. You'd introduce the layers, you describe how they interact, and then you point out, look at how it loops back. Okay, that looping is, we'll call it self-reference. Then we'll move on from there and say the self is that self-reference accounted for in narratives. How is it accounted for? The proximity complex.
This is a technical Buddhist type escape.
So self doesn't appear as a real thing.
You don't need this type of intellectualization to approach this chart, and that's what I'm trying to get to.
If you're not doing an intellectual
when
orientation,
I speak, I'm not talking technical to you. You should know that by now.
This chart isn't meant for somebody who's not doing the technical stuff. I wouldn't want this chart to be introduced to somebody who's not looking at the technical elements of it, the academic parts of it.
Sure.
That's actually not a good strategy at all.
No, I agree with that.
This is like elite stuff, if you will. This is like the esoteric shit. It's happening to us because we are so deep.
The story could be told to anybody. A story of a person who is trying to understand themselves, looked at a map of how the mind creates objects, and then associated that self as an object within that chart.
So
this is a story people can understand.
What's wrong with making a new chart that is much more simpler?
I didn't ask for a new chart.
No. Listen. What is wrong with simply making a chart that is more directed at the person it's for, that utilizes the concepts of this chart in a simpler sense?
Yeah, this is
that's what I would do. I wouldn't go all the way.
No, I'm not saying that this should be made an approach. I'm
No.
just imagining the scenario in which somebody hears a narrative, and even though they're laymen, it makes sense to them. Someone tried to discover themselves. They looked at a map.
It would be
They
simpler.
saw an object. They
It'd be
saw object, which is a type of thing.
I'm all for simplifying, like making a simpler other maps that make use of this as a utility, as a backbone. You know, like you don't have to go into the details, but if you wanted to, go here.
Right.
Totally cool. Like
Okay,
we can
then
probably
we agree.
we can probably make an entire tapestry of those, like
And
that
these
cover,
types of statements would be something that could help to try appeal to
they go
people.
from like they go from this to moment and dream to like ontological matrix to like all of these different facets of the model that aren't clearly aren't connected aside from one's intuition, effectively, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it wouldn't be this map. I would like leave this one as is, for the explanation is that it's for, and use
Depends who you
something.
are.
Yeah, and use something else for other things, because I don't want to lose the details that are expressed there. I totally don't.
But okay, my point wasn't to try and help or to model ingress for devotional temperament. My point was here to give a soundbite where somebody who's, say, maybe understands a bit of pragmatic, is on the pragmatic side, maybe leaning towards academic somehow, can hear a narrative and be able to place this chart.
So
maybe that works for them.
So what I
That's
would
all
not,
I
I would,
tried to
I would
do.
not, I would not use this chart. I would just not. I
But
would.
we are talking about this chart, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to give it better context. I'm trying to give people a better chance
So
to
the
understand what it's about.
So the
That's
context.
all.
the
We're not talking
No,
ingress.
strategy.
Strategy.
I don't think you're.
We're not strategizing on ingress guidance.
There is a precluded sort of assumption when it comes to reading this chart. An assumption I failed at precluding myself. Right. You really have to fondle the model's balls, if you will, to get to what the fuck this is saying. Likewise with the affect chart, it's
Right.
just as complex. It's leaving nothing to the uninitiated, like literally nothing to the uninitiated, and it was never the goal to do that. This is like the raw shit.
Affect chart is
The
more approachable.
aggregates. This is the
This
aggregates.
is one of the least
So the
approachable.
affects chart is a development from the loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy and equanimity meditation lessons from Buddhism. This one was from Jnana meditation and the recognition of the five aggregates. These are not layman. This is not layman shit. It's not. It's never been layman shit. This is like the shit that's behind that shit that explains why you would do that. So of course it's not going to make sense immediately.
We describe that as academic material,
and it's on the extreme of the eyeball chart.
Yeah.
It's not an escapable problem. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah. When outside of the eye chart points at like kind of more non-causality stuff, whereas within the eye you can calculate like a machine. Things get calculated easily, but outside of that you see, well, what's even the premise of your what are your archetypes? What are your fundamentals that you're calculating with?
The phenomenology.
How did those even get there?
Yeah.
It like breaks it apart.
Yeah, it's becomes.
So that's what this is. And it becomes more of a trip.
Yeah.
I like how we said synchronistic or
synchronic and linear.
Right.
If
This is
you were looking
synchronic.
and linear.
Fine, we can use it to look at both.
Because there is a temporal element from going to signal to symbol to artifact to meme, right? Like you have to create the signals to create the symbols.
Protocols are synchronic.
Like yes and no. You have to have the assembled string, but once you have the string assembled, it's recognized as a single unit. Right?
It's the same as it ever was through all time.
There's the assembly part, and then there's the reading part.
To everything.
So passive active, passive act. That's what we're talking about there. So there's an assemblatory element, and then there's a running element,
Space and time.
and it's always running at the same time. Hence, it's actually also synchronic at the same in the same space. So you don't have a program that is not bits, but you don't produce bits without running programs.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Right. So that's not to be non-expected.
Unless you're sitting there with a fucking wire going, but then the program's coming from you. So even then, it's just bootstrapping the system.
Yep. Well, this entire meeting turned into about the brain chart, which is awesome.
Well, I'm glad I was able to explain to you the fundamentals, at least to you.
And that was great. And also, I think we made some headway on like the discussion about the polymorphic machine and the market machine as being like
earlier.
that's what I wanted to be able to convey that or communicate that amongst say whatever economy comes and goes. Let's call them economies as in states of things.
So,
right?
so to be clear, so we have an agreement. When I say economy, and I'm sorry, I'm owning it like that. So if we say economy,
So
we should mean
configuration
we
of
should- we should-
typical
we should talk
behaviors, including
a focus.
both market and
So there's a focus.
polymorphism.
It's always going to be all the economies that we've talked about. Just a rearrangement of each, of how they're arranged. So we have the starting points
That
of
too.
trade. We have the starting point of gift. We call them economies too. Now, another arrangement for trade and gift is a very temporary, unstable arrangement called feast. And then that stabilizes into market. Feast and market subsume trade and gift. So there's no distinction between feast, trade, and gift.
Yeah.
And then there's even less of a distinction in feast, trade, and gift through currency.
There is a distinction, but not the system can never see a distinction. What can happen is the polymorphic machine can still emerge within its milieu.
Right.
At any time, it can just start
Right.
doing things with its agency and whatever.
So it's taking the concept of currency and making it isomorphic to the time
I do enjoy that.
before currency actually could affect anything. So back to the animistic descriptor
And
of
what happens when
humanity.
you make a trade with an enemy in order to feed your family? Like who actually did that? Was it the polymorphism or the mechanism, the machine, the market?
It's obfuscated. You can't answer this question.
Right. And from the system perspective, it doesn't look like it could be anything else than market.
When I'm saying obfuscated, I'm not talking about a question we don't know the answer to, but could find out. I'm saying the answer to the question is literally erased from the base-time continuum, from the mythology in which it originated. It
Right.
gets laundered through the numeric system, and then words pop back out from the numeric system that have nothing to do with anything. That is the same situation that you find at the event horizon, Hawking's radiation, if you want a physical analogy. You can't tell from what's coming out of the Hawking's radiation what went into the black hole. And when I'm talking, that's what I mean by obfuscation. There's like no logical further connection. It gets translated through numerical numbers, goes through balance sheets, and then regurgitated back as other commodities.
Right. Often the only concrete evidence points towards a market machine operating, and probably not the polymorphic.
Right, because when you follow what had happened, you have to go through the enumeration process, and then when you
Right.
follow that, it
To try
erases the
because
information.
you're accounting for it for something, right?
Right, but by accounting for that, you erase all other narratives.
I feel like we've opened up some new discussion today and
Ooh.
made developments. Yeah, definitely room for meditation and thought. But I did want to cut it early today, just because I feel like the most of this stream was about that and the brain chart, and we're definitely not finishing up the axiological conspiracy.
Well,
So
now that we've discussed
unless
the
you want to
passive,
try soundbite it,
check this out though.
go ahead.
Check this. Just a thought. Now that we were like
It
looking
should be
at
connected.
the brain chart and the passive and the active side, and we're talking about conspiracy, and we're talking about charlatanism, and we can now go that dig deeper by going into like canvas selection and direction that happens passively, how charlatanism works into that, how
So that's
affect
where we would
works
have to
into
look.
that.
Right, for the manipulation of reality,
Yeah.
sort of.
So we've been looking for at the affect chart for this. Now we can do the same exercise with this diagram and refer back to everything we've learned from the affect chart.
Right.
Connect
Like
the
that
two.
vulnerability to feeling hatred or greed or whatever,
Which is
out of pleasure, pain,
Like, so in this diagram here, it would like show up as hatred and whatnot in the objective
Right.
cycle, right? So
Right.
that's where that will
This is
feed
more-
back into the system.
This is more like the memeplex of it, and the affect being more content feeling. I guess I don't know, content.
Since so this is
There's
like
a form and
so
content.
this is how it builds it out of the building blocks, including affect being a building block, and the affect chart is how the existing narrative transforms itself into the next momentum narrative. So the incoming dream being output as dream. What does affect actually do to that process? And so when we get to here, we have our direction selection and whatnot pointed towards the hatred, the greed,
Right.
the callousness that the narrative will eventually express. So
Right.
the pain comes from affect raw, gets transformed
Right.
here
So
into
this is the
actual.
connection in the chart to memeplex. What's called memeplex, you could see as the affect would be the link, I guess, in this chart.
Affect and then through the
To
artifact,
artifact.
canvas and direction, and then this whole thing together comes together as a
I guess, yeah. Yeah, because canvas, like when you have a narrative of hatred of a certain thing, like this is already, you've selected, you've done all kinds of.
What you hate caused you pain, you hate it more.
Yeah. This reminds of the codependency of it all, of the layers. They're all happening at once.
Yeah, so this chart does certainly bleeds into affect, but no way or shape or
I feel
form.
like they will be connected at some
They
point.
are connected in the same way
But
that
we will actually map it, like draw it out.
it's the same connection that you see that happens in the relationship between the moment diagram and the dream diagram, which the dream is like this big thing of like where the squares end up being.
Right. So
And
this
then-
is the
and-
moment to the,
and then-
the affect dream.
And then like the moment diagram is like taking one of those squares and breaking it apart inside of where they get strung together at that one
Right.
instance in the dream.
Yep.
Where the needle actually
Because
hits the vinyl.
there is an automation happening through artifact of our world, our decision, who we are, what we're doing, where we're going, and the stories that come from through our senses, like this is good, this is bad, that's not, I want this, I don't, that hurt,
Mhm.
this didn't.
Like this,
They're connected.
there's no choice in what the artifacts are. The artifact landscape, it's not a chosen
Right.
thing.
It's presented.
It's
We
what
have,
it's what you work with.
It's we're given
And the work with
an operating
is the
system.
memeplex. Right, like that's the connection we're using from passive to active. But you don't get.
with.
It's like you can't read that what wasn't written, right? Like if I'm reading zigzag, it's because it's on this fucking
And
paper.
you didn't get to choose what
came to my eyes exactly.
Right.
So that's what artifact really is referring to, whether it's visual, whether it's in sense.
And same with whether you recognize something like a couch. because you've encountered couches before. It just
Right.
happens. It's there.
But would imagine encountering a couch without having the word couch in your head and only seeing chair.
Right? You can just start investigating chair.
Wide chair.
Wide chair, yeah.
Fat chair. Or
Right. So
like,
the properties, it extends often. You must extend often.
just because like there is a word for it doesn't mean your brain is going to facilitate that word for you as an artifact.
If you were walking for a long time and the couch was there and you wanted to sit down, quite immediately the chair association would come up and like, is this a kind of a chair?
Not even chair, sitting. The
Yeah,
idea
sit.
behind sitting.
Right,
You don't. You don't.
A seat. Is it a seat?
Yeah.
Right? Not a chair.
Chair,
Silly me.
chair just satisfies that question.
Yeah.
If it's chair, then the answer is yes.
Is it a seat?
So there's the intention behind the provocation of the identity, and that identity will fulfill a
Not
query.
not all chairs are seats. You have to look at it and make sure it's not broken.
You remember the bench earlier today?
Yes. There was a sign placed.
That it is not, in fact, a seat.
No.
While the object in question was, in fact, a seat.
It appeared to be a seat, but just in case you didn't notice, the entire seating area is slanted at a
Non-seatable
30
configuration.
at a 40-degree angle. 30.
An unseatable configuration.
30-degree angle.
The seating
In
attempt,
case you didn't
the
notice.
seating attempt was there.
In case
However,
you
it
didn't
didn't
notice.
fulfill the prophecy of
In
seating.
case you didn't notice, this platform has been
Deformed.
rotated, and its properties no longer constitute a seat.
Despite the object being labeled as
In your brain.
a
In your brain.
a seating mechanism.
This is a picnic table.
Yes.
Despite the fact that it is a picnic table,
So-
which
so
is normally a seat.
In case it isn't clear, we came across a broken picnic table.
Good to explain.
That's what we're talking about. A broken picnic table.
Right.
The brain identifies it as a seating surface. The context of its
Built like crap. What a shite
the context
design.
of its current structure gave us a very different picture.
Yep.
And it's a fun little exercise to explore in the context of this map, because this is like trying to identify the relationship between artifacts, the thing that does bubble
Right.
up through passively, and how you act upon that.
Right.
There was another artifact that says, no, it's not a seating
Right.
contraption.
Right. Right. And even if that wasn't spelled out for you,
You might have noticed it.
right? There's this upper function being like, okay, it's presented to me. This is a seat. Wait a minute.
It's broken.
It doesn't look like. If I imagine myself sitting on it, it's not working.
Yeah.
Right. So, but even that seems like it could be automatic feedback. Like, where is the horizontal surface to sit? It's not a seat. It automatically was not a seat to anybody. They didn't need to put a label saying
So
this is not a horizontal platform.
you're pointing at a very faulty question. Do we have free will?
Right. Okay.
Everything about this chart is going to be like screaming at you. It ain't free.
There's a price to pay.
It's codependent upon the artifacts. The artifacts are codependent upon the process of what signals are being fed back into the system through the objective stuff. And there's no distinct line drawn anywhere at all. So will is
Right.
both not free and free at the same time. It's not.
But somehow we end up modeling ourselves as having these moments in which we can select and pick and notice and choose.
That is simply the expression of the fact that there is no deterministic outcome. We have to determine it as we go. Like the moment is that deterministic element, and the question of determinism is essentially
becomes a point of friction now, because if you think about what I'm just saying, there is a determinism, and it's fed through the potentiality of whatever's possible. So you can determine what will be determined, but you can determine it at the time of the activity.
By making a determination.
So determinations are inescapably made, but you can't figure out what they will be. It's an emergent.
Right.
As
This is
element.
not
So
not Jeb.
you can't follow it logically from the bottom.
Jeb, because we're going up a layer.
Yeah, it goes back to from the top. So the causality loop is broken in that sense.
That happens at every layer. That's a fact of.
And and that's the importance of seeing how signals feed back into it, and then
Like they can signals or whatever. Our maps can only get better and better. That's all we can try to do. We can't just.
but the fact of mapping itself sends signals reverberating
We-
back through
we
the
can't
system
get out of that.
that manage the same maps that
Right.
that remanage that remanage.
So like we can manage what's going on, but we can't just like be outside of it somehow.
Just because we managed it the first time doesn't mean it's managed the second time and the third time. And every single deterministic step is its own potential.
Horizons. At every moment.
I really like that because it ends up being another version of what what's his name? Hero of a Thousand Faces.
I forgot his name too at some point. Not McDonald.
Joseph
Campbell. Yeah.
Joseph Campbell. He was talking about like the difference between eternity and everlasting. And he was making a point of like how heaven is like a concept, and as a concept it's like it's everlasting, but because it's a, this is me putting words in his mouth now, but because as a concept, because of its existence as a concept, it shifts through time, like what it is.
Yeah.
But all moments are eternal. So because this happened, it happened forever and for eternity. That happened. So a moment, even though it has passed, is in a sense eternal. But the conceptual idea of like paradise and whatnot,
Right,
are more like the everlasting. Like they resurge, they're never the same. So there's like a.
That's a good distinction.
Yeah.
It feels like that points to model, eternal being something more stable.
Well, I don't know if that's what he meant, but it's definitely the way I'm going to take
It's
it.
a good read. Good read. Anyways, yeah, we're up on time, and this is pretty much it. I enjoyed the crap out of this session.
Nice.
We tried to keep it casual, and we went old school, and
I tried to say I'm only cutting you off because I'm excited.
yeah,
Because
happened
I
once or twice, and I was
actually-
cutting you off too, so it was a back and forth.
I'm pretty
That's
sure.
how I interpreted it.
I'm pretty sure we negotiated that one fairly well.
I feel like I might even have like a 40 to 45%
Download,
word percentage.
Upload.
No, word percentage on the transcript, which I haven't done in a while. But probably would be nice. There's a lot to catch up on and
so
feed into the AI.
what I like about, I think why we called it the brain chart is because if you think about it as a mind, it kind of like works as a metaphor, right?
Yeah, it's hard to lose
it's
that
like,
the brain shape.
It's like an individual mind, but it's also the collective mind. It's the conscious mind. It's the unconscious mind. Words I don't really like to use at all.
Sure.
But we do have.
Just means we have to appropriate some technically to a term.
We ended up having a passive and an active, right? But ironically, in the diagram, you'll see more activity in the passive and less and more automation in the active, right? Because there's like literally no filtering mechanisms going further upwards. All the directionality, all of the affect.
Hey, we can be thankful for that because we don't have to calculate it ourselves. It's done for us. Imagine the grueling.
The trope of every
Is this a couch, right? Like looking at the field of grass and being stunned by all the blades, how many there are.
And this is where the charlatan shines. But you see, it's been given to us as a gift. Kind of.
Oh yes.
It's a gift that you give yourself. If you see the cycle through completion. Yes, there is a gift. Like you're skimming on the artifacts from the top for sure. Totally a gift. But it's a gift that you are giving yourself by feeding the correct signals back to the bottom and recuperating the artifact. It's clearly evident in farming, for example, or gardening, or things like that. You put shit into the soil, you get some back.
I like that you put that term. Recuperation completely flips the narrative on taking back artifacts into our own. What does this mean? A different purpose rather than their automated, built-in purpose, their mass purpose, right?
Yeah, like for gardening, it's like rearranging that purpose that you observe initially into a new set of artifacts that you can transform back
even though
into
it's you could say systemic, industrial, whatever. It's working for a reason. That reason can be recuperated, and understood.
Back to the system is not the bad guy. All model expressions are essentially systemic. Because even if you don't go through currency, right? Even if you don't go through currency, you're making a calculation, is this worth that effort? It doesn't have to be numeric. It can be entirely qualitative. I don't feel like moving. No, it's not. I feel like it's expending my excess energy. Yes, it is.
Right. Hey, I want to do something.
I'm anxious. I want to fucking...
I'm out about, let's talk to someone.
I want to cut a tree down.
Meet people. Right. Yeah, and that brings me to remind of the point about potentiality. And we were talking about, oh, who's going to do this, who's going to do that, if people just get what they need. There's a whole, the vast potentiality which is available to us is completely constricted into a tiny subset of things that don't even work for us. We don't even get what we need by doing the system as it is. The potentiality is compacted into this tiny streamlined thing, which is scarcity, everything. It's
artificial scarcity. That's the thing. That's what that is.
A market machine, right? That's what we call it. It's a beast in a way.
Yeah.
On its own, it's escaped from us, breakaway civilization, and all that. So that's our milieu. And can we leave it on that? Do you want to?
I want to do one more thing.
Points. Bring it up.
So, gardening seems like a really great example for what the fuck we're talking about with this chart. So, one thing we said. Yeah, one thing we said is that the complexity is synchronic, right? Like you don't go from signal and object through a timeline. Is like you basically say the object is the signal, right? Like it's already the same. It appears all at once.
You can debate the chemical structure through time, but it comes to you at once.
Yeah, we're talking about a complete human being.
What's experienced.
That appears all at once. You have all the signals becoming, all the artifacts becoming, all the memes becoming, all the objects in their mind. So gardening is similar in the sense that, like from a hyperstitional point of view, the seed is the plant, is the produce, is the thing, right?
Right.
But there are certain things that you have to do. You got to plant the seed into the soil. You got to water the soil. You got to take care of the pest, whatever.
whatever it takes to
Yeah.
accomplish the growth of the
There's
potential.
an environment relationship with the plant itself. Has an environment relationship that needs to be worked on.
These are facts regardless of which stage the seed is in.
Correct. It's a timeless.
All it does is inform us what will happen to said seed through time. But the facts remain.
The model, right?
Yeah, so the synchronic
Right.
element of this is like, this is what will happen to our signal through time if
Right.
you were to imagine it going to become a full flower.
So this is like the relationship between process and narrative, the abstract and the concrete.
Yeah, there's the written narrative. If this will happen, and you know it now when the seed is planted, you know the same
Right.
thing when the seed is growing, you know the same thing when you get the flowers, you know the same thing when
The abstract narrative.
actual fruit produced.
The
Or-
type of thing. This is this type of seed. This is this type of environment. Boom, they're good.
So that's your object, right? So we're not even talking about necessarily the mind. We're talking about experience
Anything.
as a whole,
Right.
right? Like,
Takes
so
that form.
this is what it's talking about. So signals are like seeds. Symbols are like, is the seed growing or not growing? Like if you see a sprout, that's symbolic of success. But the artifact is the plant, right? So the sprout is telling you that you're going to have a plant. The plant is telling you, I'm going to enact this fruiting ceremony of thing. So once you have the plant, that's the artifact. You don't give a shit about the plant unless you care about the fucking fruit. All you need the plant for is to exercise its mimetic duty, if you will. Why the hell is it in your artificial spectrum? You're
Right.
awaiting something. You're awaiting something
It's
from
a
it.
seed that you've cultivated before you planted it now. It's
And then-
going to make more seed.
And then finally the object of your desire makes it into your meplex, and you enact upon it. You
Poppy.
cultivate it, you will do whatever the fuck you want with it.
Yeah.
There you go. No, you're hitting on this, because what else would it be in the primitive society?
Right.
What would you
Probably-
fucking waste your time on?
Pretty whacked out stuff, I imagine.
Like
Yeah.
it's not going to be bread if you don't know if you're going to be there tomorrow.
Right.
But if your
Yeah.
family has done this for generations, you might.
We've been shaped, psychedelics and all that. Seems like we've always encountered drugs.
So the passive shit gets reshaped, and the active shit just keeps moving off of it, scraping the surface elements, going on autopilot as much as possible to conserve energy. And we end up losing out because we don't dig deeper, and we don't understand specifically the causal system that drives the charlatanism behind everything else, which is through the affect, which is through the thing. And it's not like a for us situation. It's also, we have all of these tools to formulate this expression of what's happening, so fuck right off.
I'm reminded of really old thoughts that I've had. One about a project called the Mimetic Super Collider. And the idea was that it's like a distributed network of collections of protocols for how to do things. And then you just share. It's like on
It's
and runs on
reminiscent of the
internet.
concept of the marketplace of ideas, and the problem I have with this is that ideas are animistic, and the marketplace is nowhere the correct medium for it.
Well, then it's a question of how do these nodes interact. The Mimetic Super Collider project. It's a thought project, I guess you could say at this point, of having protocols, but accepting them in. And yes, how they get laundered, because now it's just a name and a do this. Context is lost when you try and put it over here, right?
Context is always lost when you abstract the immediate for the abstraction of it. And the irony behind that is that you can never express the immediate without abstracting it.
So you keep abstracting and abstracting. If the weather's like this, do this. If the dirt's like this, do that. If this, that, and eventually you can have a generalized. You can plant this anywhere, protocol, and if the environment goes wrong in any way, here's how you fix it.
Okay.
Kind of.
So here's the problem.
It's an ideal.
You start abstracting, and you create a layer of abstractions. Then you start abstracting that. Then you create another layer of abstractions. Then you create that. Another layer of abstractions.
Yeah.
So the problem is that you can get a disconnect.
You're building up crust, and you don't want to rely on that. You want to always come back to the root context of where you are and build up over and over again, never relying entirely on your structures.
So the mediation
This is
question,
almost impossible thing to convey to people of how to
unless you
how to
can
do feedback,
unless you can convey that it's worthwhile to take spectacular mediation back to the hypermediation and then isomorphize it with the artificial elements that pop up from mediating in the first place.
I'm envisioning
Making it aware of the fact that mediating is the situation in which you are in.
Right.
And
So
if
you're talking about root protocols.
Yeah. So from that,
right.
What is the best
Right.
mediation?
Yes. Yes.
The guild protocol.
We don't need
comes
to
from
leave
that.
this all up to question of how do we share protocols of the best way to do things.
No, because that's the guild.
There needs a model of the core functionality fundamentally.
That states all of this, and then
Right.
goes, okay, so how do you rearrange all of that?
And how does nobody
back
get
into the
lost
isomorphs?
when you take some of this material into your project, your sequence, your protocol? How do you reroute that information rather than just blindly copying it? How do you use it as a guide to start from basics? At every point, you must start from your basic context of your garden has this soil, has this. So that's where you start. You can have guidances brought in from elsewhere.
So you know the old expression, idiots are born every day? The simple answer, you don't.
Don't what?
You just keep going.
What was the question?
You don't try to plant new things. This is the same problem. Like you can't under scoop the plateau. You can't underplant it. You can't work against its tide. It kills you.
I think we've established that with plateaus.
Yeah.
You don't operate outside of it necessarily.
That's not what you do. You learn the history. You assimilate it and the before it. All the model is trying to do is bridge that as a language. What is happening now, post-plateau, post all of the plateaus? What used to happen before there were any plateaus? So model speak would be like, this is how you should discuss that, right? That's the niche it's carving for itself, if you will. It's not trying to like
Feels presumptuous to say post-plateau.
It's a self-referencing thing.
It's a nice.
It's more like
it's how we have pre-plateau.
it is self-serving.
Coming into it.
I'm not gonna say it's not self-serving. It is, but you know, like, given a better argument, sure, we'll move off of that.
You know,
but let's make that better argument.
I do feel like as the polymorphic machine comes into more utilization, the market machine withers in a way, and that goes along with the plateaus themselves to some extent. I don't think the core things could be lost. I don't believe that.
And that withering is actually another avenue of a problem, because
like we'll never forget about the plateaus. That's what I feel.
If the system is sensing a withering within itself,
that's a problem.
It's retaliatory.
Right.
It's very retaliatory and violent.
It's cornered. Right.
It's a very violent response. So we don't want to do that.
No, I was just saying a way of looking at it as a withering. It's not an attack. There's no attack on it, but it's how the gift economy, if you will, withered as the plateaus came up.
So the accelerationist perspective, if you will, is if model sits and actually is somehow miraculously successful, you know, like as an actual trajectory for humanity, if it actually just takes root and actually pushes back with its membrane
Let's say
against, yes. Let's say we are in that ideal situation. It is just as formidable as the system past a certain point, because what it will do is it will isolate pockets of systems into niches,
right.
and reintegrate them and reintegrate them and reintegrate. So it isn't friendly to market in that sense.
Well,
It definitely it's
this is not
it
unexpected.
is an antagonistic situation.
Universally, like talking civilization spanning stars or galaxies or
We've said
whatever.
it differently in many different ways.
You never will have, like, there always will be the trade guild between the inside and the
And
outside.
that's the
always
that,
will exist.
So when I was picturing this bubble, it's the trade guild that surrounds it
Even a new child
and
born,
reincorporates
a child born into the system, raised up as a kid, say a few 5, 6, 7 years old, whatever. There may be trade happening in some ways to get some behavior to happen.
At the risk of sounding like a real fundamentalist, is like
It was a wild thought,
people are born into model,
right?
and I'm referring to that in the sense that
They also have
the
affect.
animistic, holonic stacking picture that we've been talking about. That's what births people, because that's the
Right.
system that's been happening
So
before the
Your
system. if you will.
counterpoint is like they're born into the model, complete opposite.
Nature births people, not the
Right.
system.
Right.
The natural system births people, if you will.
Yeah, so that facility for trade must have been encouraged. The ego built up the confidence in the kid to accept. Oh, if you give me this, I'll give you that. Okay, I'm on my own. I'll get that from my parent. If I do this, I do that, then we're good. We're not the same. It's not like I want to do that.
So by definition,
I'm getting this.
So by definition, the system is an indoctrination process,
right?
So when it comes to like the post-system model, if you will, the polymorphic machine, is that you have to have a kind of indoctrination on top of the indoctrination. You got to utilize the initial one,
right,
to interject concepts.
I don't think you've ever. We've never talked about that in that way. In that, children still have to be beat through the plateaus in order to get to this point, and then
we touched on it when we compared.
I feel like we have.
We touched on this when we compared the spectacular chronology.
This chronology and plateaus.
So there was an arc with civilizations in general, and then there's an arc with the personal individual within the plateau. So once you're in the fourth plateau, how do all 4 plateaus get integrated into you? And it was like school.
This is a personal
job,
chronology.
College, career,
right?
Basically.
We gotta cut it off.
Yep.
And I think it's been great, glorious, even, and
eat my glory.
Thanks, Eon, for the tips, questions, and everything, hanging out with us. And that's about it for this one. Hopefully, even with our issues, y'all could understand. And I do appreciate the prompts very much. We appreciate, and feel like we made a lot of good headway discussion. And with that, we shall catch you all next time.